Hi guys, tonight we begin somewhere you can almost feel before you fully picture it. You're standing still for a moment, breath hanging in the air like pale smoke, while the last strip of daylight drains out of the sky. The road ahead is hard packed earth, already stiffening as the temperature slips lower. Your coat is thin by modern standards, your hat little more than felt and optimism. Somewhere far off a dog barks, and the sound feels sharper in the cold, as if the night itself is listening. You probably will not survive this not comfortably anyway, and that is kind of the point. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, and let yourself step fully into this colder world. You're travelling in the 1800s, and the cold has arrived without apology. There is no forecast, no app quietly warning you that temperatures will drop overnight. You know it because your fingers ache, and the ground has begun to crunch faintly under your boots. Night travel is not rare in this century, but it is never casual. Roads are long distances deceptive, and stopping early is not always an option. Inns are spaced far apart, and sometimes you miss one by a mile or two, which in winter might as well be 10. You pull your coat tighter, feeling the fabric resist the wind with only modest success. Wool is your main ally here. It is scratchy heavy when damp, but it holds heat even when wet. That is a mainstream historical fact that travellers knew well, even if they never use those words. Linen underneath does little once the temperature drops, and cotton, still relatively uncommon in colder regions, is nearly useless when damp. You're dressed in layers not because it is clever, but because it is all you have. As you walk, the cold announces itself in stages. First the ears, then the fingers, then a deeper, more worrying chill that seems to settle behind the ribs. Your breath becomes rhythmic, almost meditative, if you do not let panic in. Sound carries farther at night, and the crunch of your steps feels louder than it should. Every noise reminds you that you are very awake, very alive, and very exposed. In the early 19th century, long-distance travel often meant accepting nightfall as part of the journey. Stagecoaches ran on schedules that did not pause for comfort. Postal riders moved through darkness because letters mattered more than sleep. Even ordinary travellers sometimes pressed on because stopping meant sleeping outdoors, and sleeping outdoors could be worse than walking. Historians still debate whether constant movement truly kept travellers warmer, or whether it simply delayed the moment when cold damage became obvious. You glance at the sky, cloudless and indifferent. Clear nights are colder. People in the 1800s knew this through experience, not meteorology. There is a kind of folk wisdom that settles into your bones when you live without insulation or central heating. Clouds are blankets, stars are warnings. Tonight the stars are everywhere. There's a strange calm that comes with this awareness. Fear sharpens the senses, but it also narrows them. You stop thinking about tomorrow, about destinations, about comfort. Everything reduces to the next step, the next breath, the next place you might stop and crouch out of the wind. Your world shrinks to what your body's doing right now. A quirky tidbit slips in here, something you might not expect. Some 19th century travellers believed that rubbing snow on their faces early in the night could prevent frostbite, later a kind of cold inoculation. It did not work, of course, but the belief persisted in diaries and letters, especially among younger men eager to prove resilience. It is oddly relatable, this urge to bargain with the elements. You pass a stand of trees, their branches creaking softly. Wind moves through them with a low sigh, and you instinctively angle closer, knowing even thin cover can break a gust. Wind is already the enemy, though you may not fully understand why yet. It steals heat invisibly, relentlessly, and tonight it is only just beginning. Your thoughts drift, then pull back. Staying mentally alert matters. People in this era feared falling asleep in the cold more than almost anything else. Sleep felt like surrender. There is an open scholarly debate over whether hypothermia was widely understood as a medical condition in the early 1800s, or whether it was framed more as moral failure or bad luck. What matters to you is simpler. If you lie down too long, you might not get back up. You notice the smell of your own breath inside your scarf, damp wool and human warmth. It is oddly comforting. Sensory details become anchors. The feel of leather straps across your chest, the faint jingle of metal from your pack, the ache in your calves. These sensations keep you present. Somewhere along this road, generations of travellers have done exactly what you're doing now. Merchants, soldiers, migrants, messengers. Winter did not stop commerce or communication. It only made them more expensive in human terms. There is no romance in this moment, not really, but there is endurance, and that counts for something. You keep moving knowing that the coldest hours are still ahead. Midnight will be worse. Dawn will be a promise you cannot fully trust yet. For now you walk, you breathe, and you listen to the night, already learning that survival in the 1800s begins long before you ever try to sleep. You are still walking because stopping too soon feels like a mistake you cannot afford. The cold has settled more confidently now, not dramatic, just persistent. It presses in from every direction, finding seams and gaps in your clothing, with an almost intelligent patience. This is where you begin to truly understand what people in the 1800s meant when they spoke about dressing for survival rather than style. Your outfit is simple, but each piece carries expectations. Closest to your skin is linen. It is light, breathable and fine in summer, but tonight it offers almost nothing. Over that comes wool, the real workhorse of the century. Wool trousers, a wool waistcoat, maybe a wool coat if you're lucky. Woolwich smells faintly of animal and smoke, and feels heavy when damp, but it traps air, and trapped air is life. This is a mainstream historical fact that even poor labourers understood intuitively. If you had to choose one fabric to face a cold night, it was wool, no question. Still, wool is not magic. You feel it losing the battle as the temperature continues to drop. The fabric stiffens slightly, and when the wind cuts across you, the warmth it held seems to thin. Your coat is not tailored to stop drafts. Buttons leave gaps. Sleeves ride up when you move. There is no elastic, no synthetic seal. Every motion risks exposure. You tug at your cuffs trying to keep your wrists covered. Wrists and neck are weak points, though you would not use that language. You just know that when cold air touches skin, there it feels sharper, more urgent. Scarves exist, of course, but not everyone owns one. If you do, it is probably wool again, maybe knitted by someone who cared enough to try. You pull it higher, breathing through it, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. There is an odd sound to your movement now. Fabric brushing, fabric stiff and dry. Clothing in extreme cold becomes audible. It rustles instead of flowing. You become more aware of your own body because of it, every step accompanied by small reminders that what stands between you and the night is surprisingly thin. People in the 1800s often layered without fully understanding why it worked. They knew it did, and that was enough. Multiple thin layers trapped air better than one thick garment, though this was learned through suffering rather than science. Historians still argue whether this knowledge spread primarily through military practice or rural labour traditions, but either way it reaches you now in the form of mismatched layers worn out of necessity. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you adjust your coat. Some travellers stuff straw or newspaper between layers for extra insulation. Newspaper was surprisingly effective, though literacy rates meant not everyone had access to spare pages. Straw worked too until it shifted, poked, or fell out. It was uncomfortable, but discomfort ranked low on the list of concerns tonight. Your hat matters more than you expected. Felt or wool, it presses down on your head, trapping warmth that would otherwise rise and vanish. Lose the hat and you lose more heat than you realise. There are accounts of travellers turning back miles simply to retrieve a dropped cap, knowing the risk of continuing bareheaded. You reach up now, checking that yours is still firmly in place. Gloves are another gamble. Many people do not have proper gloves, only mitts or fingerless coverings. Fingers need dexterity for buckles, straps and tools, but exposed fingers numb quickly. You clench and unclench your hands as you walk, trying to keep blood moving. The sensation shifts from pain to dullness, which feels oddly worse. Moisture is the hidden enemy. Sweat from walking seeps into your clothes, especially along your back and underarms. In warmer conditions, it would evaporate harmlessly. Tonight, it chills. Wool handles moisture better than most fabrics, but even it has limits. You slow slightly, knowing that overheating now could mean freezing later. This balancing act is exhausting both physically and mentally. There is no changing room, no dry spare outfit waiting ahead. What you wear now must last the night. People wrote about this frustration often, the sense of being trapped inside damp cloth while the temperature continued to fall. Letters from settlers and traders complain less about dramatic blizzards and more about this slow creeping cold that never quite leaves your clothes. Your boots creak faintly with each step, leather stiffening as the cold deepens. Leather is another natural material that both helps and hinders. It blocks wind reasonably well, but offers little insulation on its own. Thick socks help sometimes multiple pairs layered together. Some people wrap feet in cloth scraps before putting on boots an improvised barrier against frost. There is an ongoing scholarly debate about how much clothing quality varied between social classes during winter travel. Some argue that the poor were far more vulnerable, while others point out that wealthy travellers often wore fashionable but impractical garments. Tonight class matters less than preparation. A patched wool coat beats a stylish thin one every time. As you move, you begin to feel the rhythm of your layers, how far you can pull your coat closed, how your scarf shifts when you turn your head, how the weight of fabric changes your posture. Clothing becomes something you actively manage rather than forget about. It demands attention like a quiet companion that can fail you if ignored. There is a faint smell of lanolin from the wool mixed with smoke from earlier fires. It is grounding. Smell-like touch keeps you awake. You focus on it when your thoughts drift towards stopping, towards sitting down just for a moment. You know better, or at least you know enough to keep going. The cold is not done testing your outfit yet. It is only getting started. But for now, wrapped in layers that barely cooperate, you continue forward learning, through sensation, what 19th century travellers learned the hard way. Clothing is not comfort. It is strategy. And tonight it is your first fragile line of defence. Your attention drifts downward now because the cold always does eventually. Feet are easy to forget until they start to complain, and tonight they're already making themselves known. Each step sends a muted shock upward, not pain exactly, more like a warning tap. In the 1800s, frozen toes ended journeys just as surely as broken wheels or empty purses. Your boots are leather thick, but worn. The soles have been repaired at least once, maybe twice, and the stitching lets in more air than you would like. Leather was durable, but it was never designed to insulate. Once the ground cools enough, it draws heat straight out of your feet, steady and patient. You feel it now, a slow leaching that no amount of walking fully defeats. Inside the boots are socks, hopefully wool. Wool socks were prized for winter travel, and this is a mainstream historical fact repeated in military manuals and civilian advice alike. Cotton socks, when they existed, held moisture and became icy traps. If you are unlucky enough to be wearing them, you already regret it. You flex your toes, trying to keep blood moving, trying to remember what warmth felt like. Some travellers doubled or tripled their socks, layering thin wool ones together. This helped, but only if the boots were roomy enough. Too tight and circulation suffered, making things worse. It was a delicate balance, and one learned through trial and error. You wiggle your toes, now relieved that you still can. There is a particular smell that rises from boots in cold weather. Damp leather earth, old sweat. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. You associate it with work, with movement, with being on the road. As long as you can smell your own feet, you're awake, and that counts for something. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you walk. Some 19th century travellers greased their feet with animal fat before putting on socks, believing it would repel cold and moisture. The practice was messy and uncomfortable, but some swore by it. Modern understanding suggests it helped a little with moisture, but not nearly enough to stop heat loss. Still, when options were limited, even small advantages felt worth the trouble. Snow crunches more clearly now underfoot. The sound is sharper, higher pitched, a sign that temperatures are dropping further. Snow can actually insulate the ground beneath it, but when packed hard by feet and wheels, it becomes a cold mirror reflecting chill back into anything that touches it. Your boots feel heavier with each step, not because they weigh more, but because lifting them takes more effort as your legs stiffen. You pause for a moment, just a moment, leaning your weight from one foot to the other. Standing still is dangerous, but sometimes you have to check yourself. You bend slightly, rubbing one boot against the other, friction over the toes. It helps a little. The sensation is muted, but it reminds your body that these parts still exist. Frostbite is a word people used in the 1800s, though its mechanisms were poorly understood. People knew that skin could freeze and die, turning white or grey, then black. They did not know exactly why. There is ongoing scholarly debate about how often mild frostbite went unrecognised, especially in toes, because travellers simply accepted numbness as normal. Many probably carried lasting damage without ever naming it. You resume walking more carefully now. Uneven ground is harder to navigate when feet are numb. A twisted ankle at this hour in this temperature could be fatal. You place each step with intention, listening to the feedback through thick soles and stiff leather. Balance becomes something you think about rather than assume. Some boots had wooden soles or hobnails for grip. These helped on ice, but they also conducted cold efficiently. There was always a trade-off. Warmth versus traction, durability versus comfort. The road does not care which you choose. You think briefly of horses, their hooves striking sparks sometimes against stone, their breath steaming in the dark. Animals suffered too, though they were better equipped in some ways. Thick hair, constant movement. Still, travellers worried about their mounts freezing just as much as themselves. A horse that went lame from cold hooves could strand you completely. The cold creeps upward now, from toes to arches, from arches toward ankles. You feel a tightening there, a loss of flexibility. Laces feel harder to adjust, knots more stubborn. Everything mechanical resists you in low temperatures. Fingers are not the only things that lose dexterity. There are letters from the period describing the peculiar pain of thawing feet at dawn. Not sharp, but burning as blood returns. Some compared it to standing on hot coals. Others described it as needles under the skin. This pain was almost a relief proof that feeling had returned. People dreaded the absence of sensation far more. Historians still argue whether travellers should have stopped earlier to massage and rewarm feet, or whether constant movement truly reduced injury. Accounts exist on both sides, and outcomes varied wildly. Tonight you do not have the luxury of theory. You have only what you feel and what you must do next. You keep walking, conscious now of every step, every flex, every small adjustment that might keep your feet alive through the night. The road stretches on cold and quiet, and your boots inadequate as they carry you forward one careful pace at a time. You slow your pace without fully stopping because the night has reached that dangerous middle ground where exhaustion whispers tempting ideas. Your legs feel heavy, your shoulders ache from the weight of damp wool, and a quiet thought suggests that rest might solve everything. Just a few minutes, just sitting down. But travellers of the 1800s learned early that lying flat in deep cold often led to a sleep you did not wake from, so instead you do something that feels unnatural to a modern body. You prepare to rest without lying down. You lean against a tree or a fence post or the side of a wagon if you're lucky enough to have one nearby. Upright sleep becomes the compromise between collapse and survival. Your spine remains vertical, knees slightly bent, weight shifting from foot to foot, even while your eyes close. Period journals describe this kind of rest with frustration and resignation. People wrote about dozing in fragments, waking every few minutes as muscles trembled or joints stiffened. The goal was not comfort, it was delay. Delay the deeper cold, delay unconsciousness, delay whatever waits when body temperature drops too far. Your head nods forward, chin tucked instinctively toward your chest. Exposing the neck feels dangerous now. You pull your collar higher, burrowing into your own clothing. Breath fogs the air in front of your face, then settles into your scarf. Each inhale is sharp but familiar. You've learned its rhythm. There is a faint creaking sound as the tree behind you shifts slightly in the breeze. The bark is rough through your coat, but it blocks some wind. Even this small barrier makes a difference. Experienced travellers looked for anything that interrupted airflow. A rock face, a wagon wheel, even another person standing close. An unexpected habit appears in several early 19th century accounts. Some people tied themselves loosely to trees or posts while resting upright using rope or leather straps to prevent collapsing fully. It sounds extreme, but exhaustion makes bodies unreliable. Falling sideways into snow could mean losing precious heat or drifting into deeper sleep. This improvised restraint was uncomfortable, but discomfort kept people conscious. Your knees complain first. Holding them slightly bent taxes muscles that want to relax. You shift weight again, then again. The movement is subtle, but constant. Motion keeps blood circulating even when you're not truly walking. You begin to understand why some travellers preferred pacing all night to stopping at all. There is still disagreement among historians about how effective upright rest truly was. Some argue it offered little thermal benefit and only delayed inevitable hypothermia. Others point to survival narratives where people credited these brief standing rests with saving their lives. What is clear is that people believed in it strongly enough to repeat the practice, generation after generation. Sound behaves differently when you are still. With walking paused, the night grows louder. Wind through branches, distant animal movement, your own heartbeat faint but insistent. These sounds keep you anchored. Silence would be worse. Silence invites drifting. You feel the cold deepening in your thighs and lower back. Large muscles lose heat quickly when inactive. This is where standing rest becomes a calculation. Too long and stiffness turns into numbness. Too short and fatigue overwhelms you. You close your eyes for 10 breaths, then open them. Count again. Repeat. People without watches relied on these internal measures. Breath counts, prayer repetitions. Familiar songs hummed silently. Anything that imposed structure on time. Diaries mentioned travellers reciting multiplication tables or childhood verses just to stay alert. The mind, like the body, needed movement. There is a smell now of cold wood and damp earth. Night amplifies it. You press your cheek briefly against your sleeve testing sensation. It feels duller than before, not alarming yet, but noted. Self-checks become habitual. Face, fingers, toes. You catalogue what still responds. Some believe that sleeping upright kept vital organs warmer by preventing blood from pooling. Modern physiology might question this, but belief itself shaped behaviour. When people trusted a method, they committed to it more fully. Commitment mattered. You think briefly of inns and houses, warm interiors glowing somewhere beyond the dark fields. Many travellers wrote bitterly about being turned away after hours, doors shut tight against strangers. Fear of theft or disease often outweighed charity. Knowing this, some did not even bother knocking once night fell, choosing instead the certainty of cold over the uncertainty of rejection. Your breath slows despite your efforts. Fatigue presses gently but insistently. You straighten, forcing shoulders back, reminding your body of posture. Slouching restricts breathing and compresses lungs. Soldiers were drilled to stand tall even in rest, partly for this reason. Military winter manuals from the era emphasize posture as much as clothing. There is a quiet moment when you almost forget where you are. Thoughts blur, images drift. This is the edge. You shake your head slightly, stamping one foot, then the other. The motion sends a dull ache upward, but it clears the fog. Some travellers carried small objects specifically for moments like this. A smooth stone to squeeze, a token from home, anything tactile that grounded them. You reach into your pocket, now fingers closing around something familiar. The texture reassures you. You are here, you are awake. Eventually you know you must move again. Standing rest buys time, not safety. You push away from the tree joints, protesting muscles slow to respond. Walking feels awkward at first, like waking from deep sleep, but momentum returns gradually. As you step back onto the road, you carry with you a hard-earned understanding. Rest in the cold is not about stillness. This is about controlled pause, about staying just uncomfortable enough to survive. The night is far from over, and the cold is patient, but you are learning how to meet it without surrender. Movement warms you again, but only briefly. Before long, the cold settles back in heavier this time, as if annoyed that you tried to ignore it. That is when the idea of fire begins to take shape in your thoughts. Not the romantic campfire of paintings and stories, but a small practical flame meant to keep fingers moving and fear at bay. You scan the roadside for signs of shelter, a shallow dip in the ground, a cluster of rocks, anything that might block the wind. Fire without protection is wasteful. Flames lean away from gusts heat, stolen almost as quickly as it is made. Travellers learn this quickly often after burning precious fuel for very little return. You find a spot where trees thicken their trunks close enough to slow the air. Kneeling is awkward with stiff joints, but you manage. The ground is cold through your clothes, so you crouch instead, heels down, balancing carefully. Sitting flat feels dangerous. Standing feels inefficient. This half squat is the compromise many people used. Fire-making in the 1800s was not instant. No lighters, no matches that worked reliably in damp cold. You carry flint and steel, maybe tinder kept dry in a tin or wrapped in cloth. Period accounts describe the frustration of sparks that refuse to catch fingers, numb and clumsy patience thinning with every failed strike. When the tinder finally glows, it feels like a victory out of proportion to the act itself. You coax it gently, breath slow and careful. Blow too hard and you extinguish it. Too soft and it dies anyway. The first small flame smells of resin and smoke, sharp and alive. Fire provides more than warmth. It provides light, and light changes everything. Shadows retreat slightly. The night feels less vast. Your shoulders loosen a fraction. This psychological effect shows up again and again in travel diaries, where people describe feeling calmer and more capable once a flame was lit, even if it barely warmed them. There is an odd practice mentioned in some frontier letters. Travellers sometimes heated stones by the fire, then wrapped them in cloth and placed them near their bodies, against the belly, between the thighs, at the feet. The stones cooled quickly, but even short-lived warmth could restore sensation enough to keep going. Of course, overheated stones risk burns, especially when sensation was already dulled. Fire is also dangerous. Clothing catches easily. Wool resists flames better than many fabrics, but not forever. Sparks land on sleeves, leaving small singe marks. People accepted this damage as the cost of warmth. There are accounts of travellers waking to find holes burned clean through coats and blankets. Researchers still disagree on how often winter travellers died from fire-related accidents compared to cold exposure. Some argue that open flames introduced as much risk as they mitigated, especially in exhaustion. Others point out that without fire, survival rates dropped dramatically. What is clear is that fire was treated with both respect and desperation. You extend your hands toward the heat, palms open, fingers spread. The sensation is intense, at first almost painful. Blood returns unevenly, prickling. You pull back slightly, then forward again, regulating the distance. Learning this dance takes time. Too close and you risk injury. Too far and the cold wins. The smell of smoke clings immediately to your clothes and hair. It will stay there for days, a marker of travel and exposure. People in the 1800s often associated this smell with safety. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant life. Even weeks later, the scent could trigger memories of nights like this. Fuel matters. Dry wood is best, but winter offers slim pickings. Dead branches snap loudly in the cold, announcing your presence to anyone or anything nearby. This sound sometimes made travellers hesitate, especially in regions where wolves or hostile encounters were feared. Silence had its own value. You feed the fire sparingly. There is no guarantee of more fuel ahead, and you may need this warmth later. Flames leap and settle, casting light over your boots, your knees, your gloved hands. The rest of the world remains dark. Some travellers used fire only long enough to rewarm extremities, then extinguished it deliberately, moving on before fatigue deepened. Others stayed too long, lulled by the comfort, letting muscles stiffen. The difference between these choices could be life-altering. Military winter guidelines from the era warned soldiers not to sleep too close to fires, noting cases where one side of the body overheated while the other froze. Uneven warmth confused the body and increased risk. Balanced exposure was better, though harder to achieve. As you crouch there, firelight flickering across the ground, you feel a cautious optimism. Sensation has returned to your fingers. Your breath feels less ragged. The cold has not retreated, but it has paused, considering you. Eventually you let the flame die down. Embers glow softly, then fade. You stamp them out, careful not to leave sparks. Standing again takes effort. Your knees protest. Your back stiffens. But you are warmer than before, and that matters. You step back onto the road, the memory of heat lingering like an after-image. Fire did not save you. It only helped. In the 1800s, that was often enough. You walk on carrying smoke warmth, and the knowledge that every tool you use against the cold comes with its own quiet risks. The warmth from the fire fades faster than you want it to slip away as soon as movement replaces stillness. That is when you begin to notice the presence of others more keenly. Whether they are walking beside you or camped nearby bodies mean heat, and heat is currency on a cold night. If you are travelling with companions, you close the distance without discussing it. There is no need for explanation. Shoulders brush, elbows touch. Shared space becomes intentional. People in the 1800s understood that proximity conserved warmth long before anyone spoke of thermal efficiency. Soldiers march close together in winter for this reason. Families huddled instinctively. Even strangers negotiated closeness when the cold demanded it. You stop again briefly, and this time you wrap your cloak tighter, drawing fabric and bodies inward. Cloaks were common outer garments, heavy and awkward but versatile. They could be worn wrapped or laid out. The smell of damp wool mixes with human scent, oddly comforting. Breath overlaps. The air between you feels warmer, thicker. Contemporary accounts from long-distance travellers mentioned sleeping in groups whenever possible, even when space was limited. People pressed together on wagon floors, barn lofts, or bare ground, turning themselves into a single breathing mass. Privacy disappeared. Survival replaced it. Social boundaries softened under frost. There is a lesser-known practice described in some frontier journals. Travellers sometimes arrange themselves back-to-back in a circle, cloaks overlapping, creating a human windbreak. The outer layer took the brunt of the cold air, while the inner space remained comparatively calm. It was not elegant, but it worked better than sleeping alone. You adjust your position, feeling the subtle shift in temperature as someone moves closer. The heat is not dramatic, but it is steady. Unlike fire, it does not burn out suddenly. It ebbs and flows with breathing, with heartbeats, with small unconscious movements. This shared warmth feels alive. Not everyone welcomed this closeness. Some people feared illness lice or theft. Letters from the period complain about enforced intimacy on winter roads, about waking to unfamiliar limbs tangled with your own. Yet the same letters often admit that without it, the night might have ended very differently. Scholars continue to debate how much shared body heat truly raised core temperature versus simply slowing heat loss. Measurements were impossible at the time, and modern recreations vary in results. What remains undeniable is that people trusted the method enough to repeat it across continents and cultures. You notice how fabric behaves when layered over multiple bodies. Cloaks and blankets trap pockets of warm air that shift gently. The wind hits the outer surface and loses strength before reaching you. Sound dulls slightly. Even the cold seems quieter. Blankets in the 1800s were often made of wool or animal hair, thick but uneven. Some were patched repeatedly, each patch a story. You pull one higher, tucking it under your chin. The edge smells faintly of smoke and lanolin. You focus on that smell, letting it anchor you. There is an old belief recorded in several regions that sleeping in pairs or groups confused cold spirits, making them less likely to steal breath or life. Superstition filled gaps where understanding fell short. Whether or not anyone truly believed this, the ritual of clustering together offered psychological comfort as well as physical. Your breathing begins to synchronize with those around you, not perfectly, but enough that the rhythm feels shared. Inhale, exhale. The sound is soft, almost soothing. For the first time tonight, your shoulders loosen without conscious effort. Still, sleep is not deep. People learn to remain lightly aware even while resting. A shift in weight, a sudden silence. Any change could signal danger. Shared warmth, reduced risk, but it did not remove it. There are accounts of travellers assigning someone to remain partially awake, rotating responsibility through the night. This watchfulness was less about external threats and more about internal ones, making sure no one grew dangerously still. Nudging a companion who stopped shivering. Shared heat required shared vigilance. You feel drowsiness pull at you heavier now. The temptation to fully surrender grows. You resist letting yourself drift only part way, half sleep, half listening. This balance is exhausting but safer. The cold still presses at the edges of your awareness. Your nose tingles, your ears feel stiff. But the core of you pressed among others holds on to warmth just a little longer. That margin matters. Eventually you shift again, preparing to move. Staying too long risks stiffness and deeper chill. You disentangle carefully, reluctant to leave the pocket of warmth you have built together. There is no ceremony, just quiet understanding. As you step away, the cold rushes back, immediately sharp and personal. The contrast is startling. But you carry with you the memory of shared heat and the knowledge that survival in the 1800s was rarely a solitary achievement. Warmth, like courage, multiplied when shared. Your stomach reminds you of itself long before hunger becomes a clear thought. It does this quietly at first, a hollow feeling that seems deeper than appetite. In the cold, food stops being about enjoyment. It becomes fuel, plain and urgent. Every step you take burns something, and tonight you cannot afford to run empty. You slow just enough to reach into your pack. The motion feels practiced, careful. Fingers move stiffly, protesting as they work buckles and ties. Inside, what you find is simple: hard bread, salted meat. Maybe a bit of dried fruit if you planned well or were lucky. These foods travelled well because they had to. Freshness was a luxury rarely carried into winter nights. People of the 1800s understood, even without modern nutrition science, that eating before sleep helped keep the body warm. Soldiers were often issued extra rations before cold marches, not for morale, but because a fed body resisted cold longer. This knowledge passed from camp to road, from army to civilian, until it became common sense. You eat now because not eating would be reckless. You bite into the bread. It is dense, dry, and requires effort. Chewing warms your jaw, a small but noticeable comfort. The taste is bland but familiar. Your body seems to recognize it as useful. You swallow slowly, feeling the food settle, imagining it spreading warmth from the inside out. There is a habit mentioned in a handful of travel journals that feels almost personal. Some people saved a small portion of food specifically for the coldest hour before dawn, even if they were not hungry then. The act of eating became a signal to the body, a reminder to stay active. It was less about calories and more about rhythm, a reason to wake, to move, to continue. Salted meat is tougher. You tear at it with your teeth, the fibres resisting. Salt stings your lips slightly, drawing moisture. Thirst follows quickly, and you take a careful sip from your water container. Water is cold, nearly icy, but dehydration worsens cold fatigue. Travellers learn this through miserable experience, balancing thirst against the risk of freezing containers. There are conflicting interpretations in later research about how effective eating during extreme cold truly was. Some reconstruction suggests the heat generated by digestion was modest. Others argue that the psychological boost of eating combined with steady energy release played a significant role in endurance. What matters here is how it feels to you. You feel steadier after eating. That counts. Your breath smells faintly of salt and grain. It mixes with the cold air, grounding you. Taste and smell sharpen in winter nights perhaps, because there is so little else to focus on. You become aware of each sensation as if it might matter more than usual. Some travellers carried small amounts of sugar or molasses, rare treats that provided quick energy. Sugar was expensive, but it worked fast. A spoonful could revive someone flagging from exhaustion. There are accounts of parents saving it for children, doling it out sparingly during long winter journeys. Sweetness brief and bright could pull someone back from collapse. You tuck the remaining food away carefully. There's no snacking for comfort here. Every bite is counted, rationed against distance and uncertainty. Running out too early could mean weakness later, when weakness becomes dangerous. The act of eating forces you to stop briefly, and you feel the cold press closer as movement pauses. You finish quickly, wiping your hands on your trousers, flexing fingers again to restore circulation. The warmth from digestion feels subtle, but it is there like a coal placed deep inside. You begin walking again, feeling slightly heavier, slightly stronger. Your steps regain some rhythm. The road still stretches on, dark and indifferent, but you're better equipped now than you were moments ago. Letters from the period often mention food, alongside cold, the two inseparable in memory. People remembered what they ate during the worst nights because it marked time. A crust of bread at midnight, a strip of meat before dawn. These details stayed vivid long after other memories faded. You understand why now. Eating anchors you to the present. It gives you something to do with your hands, your mouth, your thoughts. It interrupts the cold's monotony. As you walk, you feel your body working again, burning what you gave it. The night does not soften, but you do not feel quite as hollow inside it. In the 1800s, surviving cold travel meant feeding the fire, within as carefully as any campfire, one measured bite at a time. The food sits heavy but helpful in your stomach as you walk, and with it comes another temptation that travellers of the 1800s knew all too well. Alcohol. It is there in your pack or in the pocket of someone nearby, sloshing quietly in a flask or bottle. In the cold, the idea of a warming drink feels almost irresistible. You slow again, fingers brushing the container. The glass is cold through leather or cloth. Even touching it sends a small shiver up your arm. Spirits were common companions on winter roads. Whiskey, brandy, rum. They travelled well, did not freeze easily, and promised quick comfort. Many people trusted them deeply. You take a small sip and the effect is immediate. The liquid burns as it goes down, spreading a wave of warmth through your chest. It feels like relief. Your shoulders drop. Your breath eases. For a moment, the cold seems less personal, less sharp. Travel diaries from the period are full of references to this feeling. Writers described alcohol as courage in liquid form, something that steadied nerves and softened misery. Postal riders. Soldiers and settlers all carried it. It was part of the culture of endurance. But there is a quiet danger here, one that people did not fully understand at the time. Alcohol makes blood vessels widen, especially near the skin. This creates the sensation of warmth while actually allowing heat to escape faster. People knew the outcome even if they did not know the mechanism. They noticed that heavy drinking in cold weather often ended badly. You feel it now, that false comfort. Your face flushes slightly. Fingers feel warmer but also lazier. The edge of alertness dulls just enough to be concerning. You stop yourself from drinking more, forcing the flask back into your pack. Some winter travellers swore by alcohol in tiny amounts, believing moderation made the difference. Others warned against it entirely. Advice varied wildly. Later attempts to reconstruct these experiences have never reached full agreement. Some modern experiments suggest small doses may help morale without major heat loss. Others point out that judgment impairment alone makes it too risky. The road offers no controlled conditions. There is an odd custom mentioned in a few rural accounts. Some people rubbed spirits onto their skin rather than drinking them, especially on hands or feet. The evaporating alcohol felt warm at first, then cold. It likely did more harm than good, but the practice lingered, passed along by word of mouth. You notice how quiet the night feels now. Alcohol softens sound, or perhaps it softens your attention. Either way, you shake your head slightly, refocusing. Staying sharp matters more than feeling good. The smell of the spirits lingers faintly on your breath, mixing with smoke and wool. It is comforting and dangerous at the same time. You understand why people leaned on it, especially when fear crept in alongside cold. Military regulations from the era often restricted alcohol before winter marches, not out of moral concern but practical observation. Officers noticed that intoxicated soldiers lagged, stumbled, and failed to notice early signs of cold injury. Discipline, like warmth, was a survival tool. You quicken your pace slightly, using movement to counter the sluggishness creeping in. Blood pumps faster, muscles warm again. The false heat fades, replaced by a more honest ache. You prefer this. Pain keeps you present. The flask remains in your pack, unopened now. You know you may return to it later when spirits sag or fear spikes. But for now, restraint feels wiser than comfort. People in the 1800s learned many of these lessons the hard way through stories passed along roads and rivers. Tales of men found asleep in snow bottles empty beside them. Tales of others who sipped sparingly and lived to complain about the cold instead. You walk on clearer-headed again, the night pressing close. Alcohol promised warmth, but demanded vigilance. Like many tools on this road, it could help or harm depending on how it was used. Tonight you choose caution, letting the cold remain sharp enough to keep you moving forward. The ground ahead lightens slightly, not with warmth but with reflection. Snow lies thicker here, undisturbed except for the faint tracks of animals. You hesitate for a moment because snow has a reputation, and not a friendly one. Cold, blinding, dangerous. Yet travellers in the 1800s learned that snow was not always the enemy it appeared to be. As you step off the hard road and into the drift, the sound changes immediately. The crunch becomes softer, deeper. Your boots sink a little, and while the effort increases, the biting chill from the packed earth eases. Snow surprisingly insulates. Trappers, hunters, and northern travellers wrote about this, often noting that bare frozen ground stole heat faster than snow-covered soil. You kneel carefully and scoop up a handful. It squeaks faintly between your fingers, dry and powdery. This is very cold snow, the kind that does not melt easily. You shake it off quickly, then brush your gloves together. Contact is brief, respectful. Snow rewards caution. Shelter becomes the next thought. Trees are sparse here and wind moves freely across the open space. That wind is what truly drains you, not temperature alone. You look at the snow again differently now. It can be shaped, moved, stacked. Even with numb fingers it responds. Accounts from winter crossings describe travellers digging shallow hollows into snowbanks, creating low walls to block wind. These were not elaborate structures, just enough to create calm air. You begin to do the same scraping with boots and hands piling snow into a rough crescent. The work warms you breath, coming faster, muscles protesting but alive. There is a practice that appears mostly in northern regions, learned from people who had lived with snow for generations. Snow shelters, even crude ones, could hold surprising warmth. The trapped air inside warmed quickly from body heat. Travellers unfamiliar with the technique often doubted it until they tried it. Skepticism faded fast when the wind stopped cutting through clothing. You crouch behind your makeshift barrier, now feeling the difference immediately. The air feels still, sound dulls. Your breath lingers longer. It is not warm, but it is manageable. Manageable is victory. Some later attempts to measure the effectiveness of snow shelters produced mixed results. Small differences in structure, snow type and wind made outcomes vary widely. That uncertainty mirrors historical experience. Some nights snow saved lives, other nights it was not enough. People adapted anyway because adaptation was the only option. There is a strange quiet inside snow-sheltered spaces. Even now, with only a low wall between you and the open night, the world feels hushed. Snow absorbs sound. The wind roars above but whispers where you sit. This quiet has been described in diaries as unsettling at first, then deeply calming. You remember hearing stories of people melting snow for water, though you know it requires fuel and patience. Eating snow directly was discouraged in many communities, believed to worsen cold and thirst. Whether the belief was fully accurate mattered less than the caution it inspired. You resist the urge, trusting the water you carry instead. Snow carries smells differently too. Cold clean, almost metallic. It sharpens your senses. You notice your own scent more clearly now. Wool, smoke, salt, human presence in a white landscape. Some travellers wrap themselves partially in snow, intentionally covering boots or lower legs to reduce wind exposure. It sounds counterintuitive, but in still conditions it helped. Too much contact, though, risked soaking clothing. Balance mattered. You test the snow beneath you with a gloved hand. It holds shape. Good. Wet snow collapses and chills. Dry snow supports. People learn to judge this quickly, often with a single touch. You stay only briefly. Snow shelters work best when movement stops completely, and stopping completely is still dangerous tonight. But the pause helps. Your breathing slows. Your heart rate steadies. The cold feels less aggressive. As you step back onto the road, leaving the soft crunch behind you, carry new respect for the landscape. Snow is not simply an obstacle. It is a material, a tool, one that when understood can shield you from the worst of the night. Travellers in the 1800s survived not by conquering winter, but by cooperating with it when possible. Tonight's snow has offered you that cooperation quietly without drama. You thank it by moving on before it asks too much in return. You are not alone on this road even when it feels that way. Long before you see anything clearly, you sense it. A shape darker than the dark, a sound that is not wind. Animals and wagons announce themselves quietly in winter heat and mass moving through cold air. Ahead, a wagon stands still, angled slightly off the road. The horses shift their weight, hooves scraping softly. Steam rises from their flanks, pale clouds that glow faintly in the starlight. You slow as you approach, careful not to startle them. Horses in winter are both asset and liability. They generate warmth, but they also suffer, and a frightened animal in the cold is dangerous. You step closer, feeling the difference immediately. The air near the wagon is warmer, not comfortable, but altered. Wood holds heat longer than open ground, especially thick planks, soaked with the day's weak sun. People noticed this long before anyone measured it. Wagons became accidental shelters, leaned against, crawled under, or clustered around whenever travel paused. You position yourself near the rear wheel out of the wind. The The wheel is massive, rimmed with iron wood, swollen slightly from old moisture. You rest a gloved hand against it and feel faint residual warmth. It surprises you enough to make you pause. Objects remember heat longer than air does. The horses snort softly, breath loud in the quiet. You can smell them now. Hay sweat leather. It is a strong, grounding smell. Animals were central to winter travel, not just for transport, but for survival. People slept beside cattle in barns, leaned against horses on night roads, and pressed close to dogs when they had them. Body heat was shared across species without sentimentality. There are accounts of travellers crawling beneath wagons at night, wrapping themselves in cloaks and blankets, using the vehicle as both windbreak and roof. It was cramped, dirty, and uncomfortable, but it worked often enough to become habit. Under the wagon, snow piled less deeply and wind lost its bite. You crouch now, not fully beneath, but close enough to benefit. The horses shift again, hooves stamping. That movement sends warmth downward into the ground, into the air around you. You feel it at your knees, your hands. It is subtle, but steady. Some people believed animals sensed cold differently, that standing near them helped humans attune to safer temperatures. Whether or not that was true, people trusted animals in winter. If the horses refused to settle, if they trembled too hard, or grew still in the wrong way, it was taken seriously. You watch them now, noting their breathing, their posture. There is disagreement in later reconstructions about how much warmth animals truly provided to nearby humans in open conditions. Estimates vary widely, but survival stories often mention animals as turning points. A night endured because of a horse's body heat. A child kept alive between dogs. These stories persisted because they mattered. You reach out and rest your hand briefly against a horse's shoulder through cloth and hide. The warmth is undeniable, alive. The horse flicks an ear but does not pull away. There is a quiet understanding here. Mutual tolerance born of necessity. The wagon creaks softly as the wood contracts in the cold. That sound becomes a marker of time, slow and irregular. You count between creaks, letting it pace your breathing. Cold nights stretch time strangely. Anything rhythmic becomes precious. You notice the ground beneath the wagon is less icy. Snow here is thinner, trampled. Dirt shows through. You shift your feet there, feeling less bite through your soles. It is a small advantage, but small advantages stack. Some travellers hung blankets or tarps from wagons to create temporary enclosures, trapping warmth more effectively. Others warned against it, fearing trapped moisture and freezing condensation. Practices varied, shaped by region experience and luck. Winter travel was never standardized. You stay close, but not too long. Animals tire. Horses need rest without disturbance. You know better than to lean fully to sap what warmth they need to survive themselves. Balance matters. Take enough to continue, not so much that you cause harm. The smell of manure drifts faintly. Not pleasant, but familiar. In the 1800s, this smell was associated with life and shelter. Barns were warmer than houses, sometimes not because of construction, but because of animals. People accepted this without complaint. You step back, giving the horses space. The warmth lingers briefly like the memory of a fire. You adjust your clothing again, tucking fabric where you can. Fingers feel more responsive now, toes less numb. As you move on, the wagon recedes into darkness, the steam from the horses fading. You carry with you the reminder that survival was often communal even across species. Wood, leather, muscle breath, all part of the same fragile system moving through winter. The road opens again, cold rushing back to fill the space you leave, but you walk with steadier steps, now having borrowed warmth where it was offered. In the 1800s, travellers learned to read these opportunities instinctively. A wagon, a herd, a living thing willing to stand still in the cold with you. You listen for such signs now as you move forward, attuned to the quiet language of winter travel. The night is far from over, but you're learning how to take warmth where it exists and leave nothing wasted behind. The cold changes its tactics without warning. It stops biting sharply and instead settles into something quieter, more unsettling. You notice it first in your breath. It feels thicker somehow, as if the air itself has weight. Then in your skin. Sensation dulls around the edges, fading in places you were carefully monitoring before. Your face is the first concern. Cheeks tighten, nose stiffens. You touch them lightly with a gloved finger, checking for feeling. This habit appears again and again in winter travel journals. People learn to monitor themselves constantly because there were no instruments to warn them. The body had to report on its own condition, and you had to listen closely. You exhale slowly and watch the vapour drift away. Frost forms along the edge of your scarf, tiny crystals clinging to damp wool. It looks almost delicate, but you know better. Moisture freezes where it can, and frozen fabric pulls heat from skin faster. You shift the scarf slightly, exposing a different patch of cloth to your breath. Your fingers are next. You flex them deliberately one by one. The movement feels clumsy, delayed. That worries you. Loss of coordination often came before loss of pain, and loss of pain was dangerous. People in the 1800s feared numbness more than ache. Ache meant blood was still moving. Some travellers describe frostbitten skin as feeling waxy or wooden when touched. You press gently at the tip of one finger. It presses back, slow but responsive. Good, for now. There is a strange calm that sometimes follows this check. A false sense of security, perhaps. Letters mention it obliquely, the way confidence crept in right before trouble. You guard against it by staying busy, adjusting straps, tightening laces, rewrapping cloth. Your ears sting sharply when a gust catches them. Hats help, but ears are exposed more than you realise. People sometimes tied cloth strips over them, looping under the chin, sacrificing comfort for coverage. You pull your hat lower, wishing it would stay put without constant attention. Later medical descriptions tried to categorise frostbite stages, but winter travellers did not think in stages. They thought in stories. Someone lost toes after ignoring numbness. Someone else saved their hands by plunging them into cold water instead of hot. Advice conflicted wildly, outcomes varied. You remember hearing that sudden heat could damage frozen flesh. The belief was common enough to influence behaviour. People warned each other not to thrust frostbitten hands straight into fire. Whether or not the reasoning was perfect, the caution likely prevented burns at least. You keep this in mind as you move. Your nose runs slightly, then stops. The moisture freezes almost immediately. You wipe it away with your sleeve, leaving a stiff patch behind. Small annoyances pile up quickly in the cold, each one demanding attention. You pause again, briefly rubbing your hands together. The sound is dry, rasping. Wool against wool. You bring them toward your chest, tucking them under your coat for a moment, letting body heat do what it can. This posture shows up often in period illustrations, people folded inward like birds against winter. Some travellers carried mirrors specifically to check their faces for frostbite, watching for pale patches that did not flush when rubbed. Others relied on companions to warn them. Alone, you must trust your own senses, imperfect as they are. There is uncertainty even now in modern attempts to interpret historical frostbite cases. Descriptions are subjective. Terminology shifts. What one person called numbness, another called stiffness. What mattered then was response, not classification. You stamp your feet again, harder this time, restoring feeling with dull thuds. The vibration travels upward, rattling bones slightly. It is not pleasant, but it works. Blood returns in a wave of pins and needles. The cold presses in again as you resume walking, relentless but not victorious. You're alert now, watching yourself as much as the road. Every sensation becomes data. Every change a signal. Travel in the 1800s demanded this vigilance. People survived not because they were stronger than the cold, but because they paid attention to it. You do the same now, scanning your body for warning signs as carefully as you scan the darkness ahead. The night continues quiet and watchful. So do you. The idea of an inn grows larger in your mind as the night deepens. Not because you expect luxury, but because walls and a roof feel like miracles right now. Somewhere ahead, if the road is honest and your memory accurate, there should be a building with a door, maybe a hearth, maybe a bench. You hold on to that thought as you walk, letting it pull you forward. When you finally see it, the shape is smaller than you hoped. A low structure crouched beside the road windows, dark or dim, smoke uncertain. You approach slowly, every step cautious. Inns in the 1800s were unpredictable. Some were havens. Others barely deserved the name. You knock the sound dull against thick wood. It echoes more loudly than you expect, and for a moment you worry you have disturbed something better left alone. Then footsteps, a pause. The door opens a fraction, letting out a thin blade of warm air that feels almost shocking against your face. Inside smells of smoke, damp wool, and stale food. It is not unpleasant. It is human. You step in quickly, grateful just to be out of the wind. The door closes behind you, cutting off the night with a final thud. Warmth here is relative. There is a fire, yes, but it is small, its heat already claimed by those closest to it. Bodies crowd the room. Travellers, locals, maybe a driver or two. Everyone looks tired. Everyone looks guarded. You take in the scene quietly, understanding that space and warmth are negotiated carefully. Inns of this era were not hotels. They were stopping points often run by families who balanced hospitality against survival. Firewood was precious, food limited, beds fewer than bodies. Records from the time mentioned travellers sleeping on floors, tables, even leaning against walls when nothing else was available. Complaints were common, but alternatives were worse. You edge toward the fire, stopping at a respectful distance. Too close invites resentment. Too far wastes the opportunity. The heat touches one side of your body while the other remains cold, creating an uncomfortable contrast. You turn slowly, warming yourself in pieces. Someone mutters about the cold shaking their hands. Another coughs deep and wet. Illness travelled easily through spaces like this, but people still gathered. Cold pushed risk calculations in its own direction. There are stories of inns turning travellers away on the coldest nights, doors barred out of fear or lack of resources. Some of those stories end badly. Others end with people surviving outdoors out of stubbornness or luck. No two nights were the same. Hospitality depended on mood supply and sometimes prejudice. You accept a cup of something warm if it is offered. Thin broth, weak ale, hot water with herbs. It does not matter much. Heat matters more than taste. You cradle the cup, letting warmth seep into your palms. Fingers relax slightly. This alone feels worth the stop. The fire crackles softly, wood shifting as it burns. Sparks leap and fade. You watch them mesmerized, feeling your eyes grow heavy. This is another danger. Warmth indoors tempts sleep more strongly than cold outdoors ever did. People wrote about this too, the way exhaustion caught up all at once when the body finally relaxed. You fight it gently stretching, stamping one foot then the other. Staying near the fire without succumbing becomes its own skill. Some travellers set rules for themselves. Do not sit. Do not close both eyes. Leave before stiffness sets in. These rules were learned through painful experience. There is disagreement among later readers of these accounts about whether stopping at an inn during extreme cold helped or harmed overall survival. Some argue the rest and warmth were essential. Others note cases where people left too late. Muscles stiffened, judgment dulled. The truth likely sits somewhere unevenly between. You listen to fragments of conversation. Someone mentions a river frozen hard enough to cross. Another complains about a horse gone lame from cold. These snippets remind you that you are part of a moving web of stories, each traveller carrying their own night with them. Space opens briefly near the wall and you lean there, pressing your back against rough timber. The wood holds a trace of warmth from the room, enough to be noticeable. You close your eyes for a count of 5, then open them again. Discipline, not comfort. The floor beneath your boots is hard-packed dirt, colder than you expected. Heat rises. Cold sinks. People who slept on floors knew this intimately. Some inns offered raised platforms or straw pallets for this reason, but not all. Eventually you know it is time to leave. Staying longer risks too much. You gather yourself, pulling on gloves, adjusting scarf and coat. The door opens again, and the cold rushes in, startling after the relative calm inside. You step back onto the road reluctantly. The contrast is brutal. The warmth you gained begins to leak away immediately, but you're not starting from nothing. Your core holds a little more heat now. Your mind feels steadier. Behind you the inn closes up, light shrinking to a thin line, then nothing. For many travellers in the 1800s this was the pattern. Brief refuge, partial relief, then back into the dark. You walk on carrying the memory of firelight and voices with you. It is not comfort exactly, but it is something. And on nights like this, something is often enough to keep you moving until morning. You leave the inn behind, knowing that whatever warmth it gave you will not last long. The road pulls you back into its rhythm, and with it comes the question of sleep again. Not the deep kind, not the kind you miss from home, but the kind that keeps you alive until dawn. Tonight that means building yourself into something like a cocoon. You stop where the land dips slightly out of the worst of the wind. The sky still clear, stars sharp enough to feel close. You lower yourself carefully, not flat, never flat, but down enough to work. Fingers move slowly as you unroll what passes for bedding. A blanket, maybe two if you're fortunate. A cloak folded over itself. Animal skins if you come from a place where those are common. Everything smells faintly of smoke and use. People in the 1800s did not think in terms of sleeping bags, but the idea existed in pieces. Layers wrapped tightly. Openings minimized heat trapped where it could not escape easily. Trappers used sewn skins. Soldiers carried blanket rolls strapped tight. Civilians improvised endlessly. What mattered was reducing exposed surface and keeping still air close to the body. You sit first, arranging the materials around you. The ground is unforgiving. Cold rises from it steadily, so you pile whatever you can beneath your hips and legs. Extra clothing. A pack. Even a saddle if one is nearby. Elevation of a few inches makes a difference you can feel almost immediately. Once ready, you draw the blanket around your shoulders, tucking edges under your arms. Another layer goes over your legs, then folded back up towards your chest. You feel awkward, constrained. That is good. Loose arrangements leak warmth. Tight ones hold it. There is a trick mentioned in several winter travel accounts. People would pull the blanket over their head briefly, breathing inside to warm the air, then push it back just enough to breathe fresh air without losing too much heat. You try this now cautiously. The space fills with warm, damp breath almost instantly. You open a small gap near your nose. The balance feels delicate but workable. Your body begins to relax despite your efforts to stay alert. Muscles soften when they finally stop working. That softness can turn dangerous quickly. You counter it by staying semi-upright, back supported by a pack or mound of snow. Lying fully horizontal invites deeper sleep, and deeper sleep invites trouble. There is an old belief that wrapping feet separately helped keep the rest of the body warm. Whether it was true or not, people did it often. You tuck extra fabric around your boots, sealing in what heat remains. The sensation in your toes is faint but present. You take that as a win. The night sounds change when you settle. Wind moves overhead. Snow shifts softly somewhere nearby. Your own breathing grows louder in your ears. You count breaths again, using the rhythm to stay lightly awake. In, out, in, out. Some travellers wrote about the strange dreams that came during these half-sleeps. Not full narratives, just flashes. Warm kitchens, summer fields, familiar voices. Waking from them felt disorienting, like being pulled abruptly back into cold reality. You feel the edge of that now and resist it gently. You adjust the blanket again, pulling it tighter around your shoulders. The pressure feels reassuring, like being held in place. Pressure reduces movement. Movement wastes heat. Stillness controlled stillness conserves it. There is uncertainty even now about how effective these improvised cocoons truly were. Some people survived nights wrapped this way without incident. Others did not wake at all. Conditions varied too much to draw clean conclusions. What you have is experience passed along imperfectly filtered through fear and hope. Your hands grow tired of clutching fabric. You slide them inside the layers, resting them against your torso, armpits, belly, places where warmth gathers naturally. The feeling is faint but comforting. Your fingers loosen slightly, no longer clenched. Condensation forms inside the blanket from your breath. You can feel it dampening the fabric near your face. Moisture is dangerous, but uncovering fully is worse. You shift your head slightly, changing where you breathe. Small adjustments become constant companions. There is a quiet intimacy to this moment. Alone or not, you are wrapped in the tools you brought, dependent on them entirely. People often named or personalized these items in letters. A blanket given by a mother, a cloak inherited from a father. These objects carried emotional warmth as well as physical. You think briefly of dawn, how far away it feels. You resist counting hours. Instead, you focus on surviving the next few minutes, then the next. Time shrinks again manageable. Your legs twitch slightly as circulation slows. You tense and release muscles deliberately, just enough to keep blood moving without breaking the cocoon. This technique shows up often in winter accounts described as wiggling or shivering on purpose. Shivering generates heat, but uncontrolled shivering drains energy. Control is key. The cold does not disappear. It presses at the edges of your awareness constantly. Nose, cheeks, knees. But inside the layers near your core there is a fragile pocket of warmth that holds. You guard it carefully. Eventually your thoughts slow. Not sleep exactly, but something close. A drifting state where awareness fades and returns in waves. You allow this, trusting yourself to wake if the cold sharpens or numbness creeps in too far. This is how many people slept while travelling in winter during the 1800s. Not comfortably, not safely, but deliberately, wrapped in whatever they had, listening to the night through layers of wool and hope. You breathe slowly, cocooned against the dark, letting the world narrow to the simple act of staying warm enough until the next breath and the next. Sleep never fully claims you. It circles, testing the edges, then retreats when you shift or tense a muscle. At some point you realize you're not meant to pass this night alone in unconsciousness. Instead, the night becomes something shared, even if words are few. If there are others nearby, this is when the quiet agreement forms. Someone stays alert while someone else drifts. You ease out of your cocoon, slowly, careful not to let too much warmth escape at once. Your joints protest as you straighten a low ache that reminds you how long the cold has been working on you. You stand stamping lightly, feeling circulation return in uneven pulses. Nearby, another traveller shifts as well, sensing movement even in sleep. Awareness spreads without conversation. Winter travel taught people to take turns without ceremony. One person walks a little, another sits and rests. Then they trade. No schedule is written down. It is felt. Fatigue shivering slowed responses. These cues decide who watches and who rests next. You take a few steps away, just far enough to keep your body moving without disturbing others. The road looks different now. Shadows feel deeper, sounds sharper. Wind whispers across the ground, carrying distant noises you cannot quite place. Staying awake heightens everything. Night watches were common in many cold weather journeys, not because of threats from outside, but because of danger within. People feared slipping too far into sleep, feared missing the moment when cold turned from discomfort into something worse. Someone awake meant someone noticing when breathing changed or movement stopped. You pace slowly, counting steps, then turning back. The emotion keeps blood flowing without exhausting you. Too much walking risks sweat. Too little risks stiffness. You find a rhythm somewhere in between. There is a habit mentioned quietly in some old letters. People would talk softly to sleeping companions even if they did not expect an answer. A name spoken. a reminder to move fingers, a reassurance that someone was nearby. Sound itself became a tool keeping the world from fading too far. You pause near one figure now listening. Breathing is slow but steady. Chest rises and falls. You watch for subtle signs, shivering, a shift, a sigh. All good, for now. The cold feels different when you're responsible for others. Sharper, more urgent. You notice changes sooner. You feel time stretch. Minutes feel long. Your thoughts wander, then snap back. Staying alert is work. Some travellers believe that shared vigilance created warmth in its own way. Not physical heat, but resolve. People stayed alive because they were needed. Responsibility anchored them to the present. Whether or not that belief had measurable effects, it shaped behaviour. You rub your hands together again, then tuck them under your arms briefly. The warmth there is faint but real. You roll your shoulders, loosening stiffness. Movement becomes quiet maintenance. At some point, fatigue presses harder. Your watch is ending. You feel it in the way your thoughts slow in the heaviness behind your eyes. You move closer to the group again, catching the eye of someone who is stirring. No words are exchanged. A nod is enough. You settle back down, rebuilding your cocoon with practice movements. The blanket feels colder than before, but your body warms it gradually. You position yourself carefully, semi-upright, supported. Hands return to familiar places. Breathing steadies. As you drift again, you remain aware of sound. Footsteps pacing, wind in trees, a low murmur of voices. Knowing someone else is awake allows you to let go just a little more. This pattern repeats through the night. Watch, rest, watch again. It breaks time into manageable pieces. Dawn does not feel so impossibly far when you measure it in turns instead of hours. People who travel this way remember the faces of those who watched over them. Gratitude lingered long after the cold faded. Survival was rarely solitary. It depended on these small acts of attention repeated quietly in the dark. You let yourself sink again into that half-state aware but resting, trusting that when your body needs movement or warmth again, you will feel it. For now you breathe wrapped in fabric and shared effort carried through the night by vigilance passed gently from one tired person to another. When you open your eyes again, the world feels subtly different. Not warmer, not brighter, just altered. You become aware of who is travelling with you not as shapes in the dark, but as lives moving through the cold in very different ways. Winter does not treat everyone the same, and people in the 1800s knew this without needing to explain it. If there are women among the travellers, you notice how their movements are more careful, how clothing restricts them differently. Long skirts gather cold air, layers tangle around knees, sitting and standing take more effort. Yet many accounts from the period describe women enduring winter travel with remarkable steadiness, adapting routines quietly without comment. Extra shawls pulled tight, skirts tucked up when walking rules bent in favour of survival. Children change everything. A child cannot regulate body heat, as well cannot ignore discomfort as long. You see how adults cluster around them, instinctively turning bodies into barriers against wind. Someone lifts a child onto a lap, wraps extra fabric around small shoulders, presses close. Sleep becomes lighter. Watching becomes constant. Travel journals often mention how children were kept awake deliberately during the coldest hours, singing softly, telling stories, asking questions, anything to keep eyes open and blood moving. Exhaustion mattered less than alertness. A sleeping child in deep, cold, frightened adults more than crying ever did. Older travellers move differently still. Joints stiffen faster. Circulation slows. They stop more often, stretch longer. Others adjust pace to match them, knowing separation in winter is dangerous. There is patience here, born of understanding. No one moves faster than the slowest person for long. There is a small habit described in several family letters. Mothers or grandmothers would place their hands directly against a child's chest or belly, under clothing checking warmth by feel rather than guess. Thermometers were rare. Touch was the measure. You see this now, a hand slipping inside layers briefly, then withdrawing with relief. Men often carried heavier loads not out of strength alone but expectation. Packs shifted between shoulders during stops. Someone quietly hands off a bundle when fatigue shows. These exchanges happen without ceremony. Survival strips away pride quickly. Later readers of these accounts have struggled to compare experiences across age and gender. Details vary, voices differ, some stories emphasize endurance, others dwell on vulnerability. Together they paint an uneven picture. Winter travel exposed differences sharply, but it also forced cooperation that blurred them again. You notice how warmth is distributed intentionally. Extra socks go to the smallest feet. The thickest blanket is shared, not hoarded. Food portions shift subtly. No one announces these choices. They emerge from shared understanding of risk. There is a fleeting moment when you catch a glimpse of a face in firelight or starlight. Pale, tired, determined. The expression is familiar across generations. People wrote about it later, trying to capture the look of someone enduring cold, for reasons that felt necessary at the time. Clothing is adjusted again and again for those who struggle most. Scarves retied, hats pulled lower, sleeves tugged down. These small acts accumulate into protection. They also create connection. Touch reminds everyone that they are not alone. Some families travelled with routines designed specifically for winter nights. Songs sung only in the cold. Stories told only when the stars were sharp and bright. These rituals marked time and offered comfort, especially to the young. Memory softened hardship after the fact. You feel a quiet respect settle in as you watch these dynamics play out. Winter travel was not just a physical challenge, it was a social one. Who you travelled with shaped how you survived. Alone, you relied on habit. Together, you relied on each other. The cold remains indifferent. It presses in equally on all bodies, but response varies. Attention flows where it is needed most. Strength is shared. Weakness is protected. As the night stretches on, you sense how these roles shift fluidly. Someone strong falters. Someone quiet steps forward. Cold rearranges hierarchies quickly. You draw your own clothing tighter again, aware of how easily you could be the one needing help next. The thought does not frighten you. It steadies you. In the 1800s, surviving winter travel meant accepting both roles, caretaker and cared for, sometimes within the same hour. You settle back into your rhythm, walking when needed, resting when allowed, watching when it is your turn. The group moves together through the darkness, shaped by age, by strength, by circumstance, and held together by the simple, urgent goal of reaching morning intact. The road bends slightly, and with it your thoughts drift to things you didn't grow up knowing but learned anyway, usually too late, and always in the cold. Some of what keeps you moving tonight did not come from books or officials or anything written down. It came from watching others who seemed to belong to winter itself. You remember the first time you saw someone build warmth out of almost nothing. No fire, no shelter worth naming, just movement, positioning, and patience. The kind of knowledge that does not announce itself. It shows up quietly, passed from one set of hands to another. In many places during the 1800s, travellers borrowed winter habits from people who had lived with snow for generations. This borrowing was not always respectful, and it was rarely acknowledged properly, but it happened constantly. Techniques spread because they worked, not because anyone understood them fully. You shift your path slightly now, choosing higher ground where snow drifts differently. Someone once told you that cold pools in low places at night. You do not know if that is always true, but you have felt the difference enough times to trust it. The air here feels marginally lighter, less biting. Sometimes survival is built on small beliefs reinforced by experience. You adjust your gait, shortening your steps to conserve energy. Long strides waste heat. You learned that watching someone else move more efficiently through snow, barely lifting their feet, sliding them forward instead. It looked slow, but it lasted longer. There was also the matter of breathing. Deep, steady breath through the nose when possible. Mouth breathing dried the throat and cooled the lungs too quickly. People argued about this endlessly, offering advice that contradicted itself. In the end, most followed what felt sustainable. Tonight you breathe slowly, deliberately, warming the air before it sinks into your chest. You recall being shown how to use the environment itself. Snow piled against the windward side of a tree, standing where the land dips just enough to block gusts without trapping cold air. None of this was written in manuals meant for city readers. It lived in demonstration and repetition. At some point you press your gloved hand into snow and feel how the surface crust breaks, revealing softer layers beneath. Someone once explained that deeper snow stayed closer to the ground's temperature. You never confirmed it, but you noticed that digging down sometimes felt less brutal than staying exposed. Tonight that memory guides where you stop. You tuck yourself briefly behind a snowbank shaped by wind, not by tools. The air here is still, sound dulls, even your thoughts quiet for a moment. You rest without stopping, fully shifting weight, staying alert. This pause feels different from others. Intentional. Informed. There were disagreements even then about which practices truly helped. Some swore by constant movement. Others insisted on frequent pauses. Some trusted snow. Others feared it deeply. What mattered most was flexibility. People who adapted lived longer than those who clung rigidly to one rule. You notice the way your body responds to these borrowed techniques. Less panic, less wasted effort, warmth that lasts slightly longer. It is not dramatic, but it accumulates. Clothing is adjusted again, not because it failed, but because conditions changed. Someone once told you that winter punishes inattention more than weakness. You believe that now. Every layer is checked, every strap retied, every gap sealed. There is a quiet humility in using knowledge that is not yours by origin. Many travellers of the 1800s did this without reflection. Others resisted clinging to familiar habits even when they failed. You're too tired tonight for pride. You use what works. Your steps settle into a rhythm that feels less forced. The night remains cold, but it no longer feels entirely hostile. You're not conquering it. You're cooperating with it piece by piece. As you move on, you realize that much of what keeps you alive tonight came from watching, listening, and copying. Survival did not belong to one culture or one path. It belonged to those who paid attention. The road continues ahead, pale under starlight. Your breath steadies, your body adjusts. You carry these learned instincts with you now quietly, letting them guide you through the remaining darkness toward whatever the night still holds. The wind announces itself before you see what it has done. It moves through the landscape with a low, restless sound, bending grasses buried under snow, worrying at loose fabric slipping into every opening it can find. Cold alone is manageable. Cold that moves is something else entirely. You turn your body, instinctively angling your shoulders away from the gusts. It helps a little. Wind strips heat faster than still air ever could, and travellers learn to respect it more than temperature itself. Nights with modest cold but heavy wind were remembered as worse than far colder, calmer ones. Your coat flaps slightly and you clamp it tighter. Buttons strain. Fabric shifts. You feel cold fingers of air slip through seams and closures hunting skin. Every gap becomes a liability. You stop briefly to retie a scarf, tucking ends deeper, sacrificing comfort for coverage. Wind changes the soundscape too. It carries noise, away distorts distance. Footsteps sound farther off than they are. Trees moan unevenly. This makes judging space harder, and judging space poorly leads to missteps. You slow down, placing feet more carefully. People travelling in winter often chose longer routes simply to avoid exposed ridges or open plains. Sheltered paths mattered more than direct ones. You remember being told that valleys could trap cold, but hills invited wind. The choice was never perfect. Tonight the wind wins and you adjust. You move closer to a line of brush, letting it break the gusts. The difference is immediate. Air stills slightly. The cold feels less aggressive. You linger there longer than planned, taking advantage of the pause. There is an odd habit noted in some winter journeys. People walk slightly sideways into strong wind-reducing surface area exposed. It looked awkward, but it worked enough to be remembered. You try it now, feeling faintly ridiculous but warmer. Your eyes water as the wind finds them. Tears freeze at the corners. You blink hard, wiping them away with a stiff sleeve. Vision matters. Losing it to frost or windburn would be disastrous. You pull your hat lower, shadowing your eyes. Wind carries scent differently too. You catch a whiff of smoke from somewhere far off, maybe a homestead, maybe another traveller. It fades quickly, but it gives you direction. You angle toward it unconsciously, drawn by the idea of shelter even if it never appears. Some believe that facing into the wind built endurance, that turning away was weakness. Others avoided it whenever possible. Experience taught most people to compromise. Face it briefly. Turn away when you can. Pride has little place here. Your breathing changes in the wind. Each inhale feels colder, sharper. You try to breathe through fabric again, warming air slightly before it reaches your lungs. The cloth grows damp. You adjust it often, trading moisture for warmth carefully. There is no agreement even now on how people best managed wind exposure with the clothing of the time. Advice from the era contradicts itself freely. What remains consistent is the attention paid to it. Wind was never ignored. You feel it tug at you again, stronger now, and you lean into it, bending slightly at the waist. Balance becomes active, muscles engage just to keep you upright. This effort generates heat, but it also drains energy. Everything is a trade. You reach a shallow cut in the land, a dip carved by water long frozen. The wind flows over it, leaving the bottom calmer. You step down gratefully, letting the gusts pass above your head. The silence here feels almost unreal after the constant pressure. You rest briefly, shifting weight, rolling shoulders. Your face tingles where the wind burned it. Sensation returns slowly. You rub your cheeks gently, careful not to be too rough. Skin is fragile in this cold. Then the road rises again and the wind returns impatient. You straighten, set your shoulders and move forward. You have learned to read it now, to respect its strength without fearing it entirely. The night stretches on, shaped by moving air and stubborn bodies. You continue through it, adjusting constantly, letting the wind teach you where to stand, when to move, and how much of yourself to expose. The ground beneath your feet changes texture again, and you feel it before you see it clearly. What was once uneven dirt and packed snow has become smoother, harder, almost polished. Ice has taken over quietly, turning the landscape into something both useful and dangerous. Ahead of you, the road dips toward a river. In warmer months, it would be an obstacle, something to cross carefully by bridge or ford. Tonight it lies flat and pale, frozen into a broad ribbon that reflects starlight faintly. People in the 1800s crossed frozen rivers regularly, sometimes by choice, sometimes because there was no other way forward. You approach the edge, cautiously testing with one boot before committing weight. The surface holds solid and unyielding. Cold has done its work thoroughly here. You step out slowly, spreading your weight, keeping movement smooth. Sudden motions crack ice. Slow ones negotiate with it. Ice roads were a seasonal reality in many regions. When rivers froze hard enough, they became highways shorter and flatter than winding land routes. Wagons crossed them. Herds crossed them. People trusted them, though never completely. Stories circulated constantly of ice giving way without warning, swallowing horses' cargo lives. You listen as you walk. Ice speaks when it shifts. A low groan. A sharp crack that travels outward. Each sound tightens your chest. You pause when you hear them, waiting to see if they fade or grow. Tonight they fade. You continue. The cold feels different here. Ice reflects it upward, surrounding you with chill from below as well as above. Your boots feel suddenly inadequate again. You shorten your stride, minimizing contact time, letting each step land and lift smoothly. Some travellers dragged sleds across ice rather than carrying loads on their backs. The smooth surface made hauling easier, though stopping was harder. Once momentum started controlling, it required skill. You imagine the weight pulling forward relentlessly, forcing constant attention. You notice that wind behaves differently here too. It slides uninterrupted across the flat surface, gaining strength. You lower your head slightly, pulling your scarf tight. The air bites harder on exposed skin. There are accounts of people sleeping briefly on frozen rivers when caught mid-crossing using sleds or packs as insulation. The idea feels reckless, yet desperation made many things acceptable. Others insisted on crossing without stopping at all, pushing through exhaustion to reach solid ground again. You keep moving, eyes fixed on the far bank. It looks closer than it is. Distance deceives easily on flat, pale surfaces. You measure progress by time instead. Count steps. Count breaths. Halfway across, you stop again to test sensation. Toes ache dully. Fingers feel stiff but responsive. Face tingles where wind has scoured it. You rub your nose lightly, then tuck your hands away again. Awareness stays sharp. The ice creaks once more louder this time. Your heart jumps. You freeze not metaphorically but literally. Movement stops. Weight distributes evenly. After a moment the sound fades again, leaving only wind and breath. You exhale slowly. No one ever fully agreed on how thick ice needed to be for safe travel. Rules of thumb varied by region and experience. Some judged by colour, others by sound, others by memory of cold nights past. None of it was foolproof. You resume walking faster now, eager to reach land. The far bank rises gently, snow piled higher where wind drifted it. When your boots finally crunch into softer ground again, relief washes through you, brief but intense. You step up and away from the ice, stamping your feet to bring blood back into them. The difference is immediate. The ground feels almost forgiving by comparison. You turn once to look back at the frozen river, its surface smooth and indifferent. For travellers in the 1800s, landscapes like this were neither friend nor enemy. They were temporary states shifting with temperature and time. Tonight the river allowed passage. Tomorrow it might not. You adjust your path and move on, leaving the ice behind, aware that winter reshapes the world constantly. Roads appear where none existed. Obstacles vanish, then return. Survival depends on noticing these changes and responding without hesitation. The night presses on, quiet and cold, and you continue forward, carrying the memory of creaking ice beneath your feet. Another lesson etched into your understanding of how people once moved through frozen worlds. Morning feels impossibly distant now, not because the night has grown longer, but because your body has begun to register the cost of all this endurance. The cold has worked its way past surface discomfort and into something deeper. You notice it when you breathe, a tightness in your chest, a shallow rhythm you did not choose consciously. You cough once quietly, more reflex than need. The sound feels loud in the still air. Cold air irritates lungs, especially after hours of exposure. Travellers from this era often wrote about waking days later with lingering coughs, sore throats, fevers that crept in after the danger seemed past. Illness rarely announced itself during the night. It waited. You swallow throat dry and raw. You take another careful sip of water, letting it warm slightly in your mouth before swallowing. Cold water shocks the system now. You have learned to be gentle with yourself in small ways, even while demanding endurance in larger ones. Your joints ache in a way that feels different from fatigue. Knees resist bending. Fingers feel swollen inside gloves, clumsy and slow. People describe this sensation in letters without medical language, calling it stiffness, heaviness, old pain awakened. Many believed cold caused sickness directly. Others blamed dampness when bad air. Explanations varied. The suffering was consistent. You notice how your pace has slowed without you deciding it. Steps shorten. Pauses lengthen. This worries you more than pain. Slowing means heat loss. Heat loss invites deeper trouble. You force yourself to count steps again, building rhythm where instinct has begun to fade. There is a particular weariness that settles behind your eyes. Not sleepiness exactly, but a fog that dulls attention. You shake your head slightly, clearing it. People feared this state. It preceded mistakes, missed signs, trips and falls. You remember hearing about travellers who survived the cold night only to collapse the next day, bodies giving up once warmth returned. Fevers flared, lungs filled, joints locked. Survival was not always immediate victory. It unfolded unevenly. You pause again, but this time to stretch carefully. Arms overhead. Shoulders rolled. Back straightened slowly. The movements feel exaggerated, almost theatrical, but they work. Blood shifts. Sensation sharpens slightly. You breathe deeper, testing capacity. There were no clear rules about how much movement was enough or too much. Advice contradicted itself freely. Some insisted rest prevented illness. Others believed rest allowed cold to settle permanently. Most people learned by listening to their bodies imperfectly. You rub your chest through layers, feeling warmth beneath your hand, faint but present. Your heart beats steadily. That steadiness reassures you. As long as it keeps rhythm, you keep going. The smell of your own breath inside the scarf has changed. Less sharp, more damp. You adjust the fabric again, exposing a fresh section to your mouth. Moisture management becomes constant. Wet cloth chills faster. You have learned this through discomfort rather than instruction. You think briefly of people who travelled often in winter. Postal carriers, traders, drivers. How many nights like this did they endure in a season? How many times did they wake coughing, aching, yet set out again? Hardship normalized through repetition. Your feet feel heavy as if each boot weighs more than before. You stamp once, then again, restoring sensation. The ache intensifies, then eases. Pain as proof of life. You accept it. There is uncertainty even now about which exposures led to lasting illness and which did not. Stories blur cause and effect. Cold nights blend together in memory. What remains is the awareness that survival did not end at sunrise. It extended into days and weeks after. You keep moving mindful now, not just of staying warm, but of staying whole, breathing carefully, eating when you can, resting without surrender. These small decisions accumulate, shaping what happens later. The night still holds you, but its grip has loosened slightly. Or perhaps you've simply grown used to it. Either way, you walk on coughing, no more breathing, steady again, carrying the quiet hope that whatever sickness the cold threatens you might outrun it by morning. Your thoughts begin to wander in a different direction now, away from immediate sensation and into memory. Not your own memories exactly, but borrowed ones. Words you have read or heard, scraps of other people's nights stitched together in your mind. Winter travel leaves marks, and some of the clearest traces were left on paper. You imagine someone like you decades earlier stopping after a night like this to write it down. Fingers stiff ink reluctant to flow. The complaints are rarely dramatic. More often they are dry, almost amused. Cold again. Feet numb. Fire scarce. Slept badly. Moved on. The understatement feels deliberate, as if describing the misery too clearly might give it more power. Many travellers kept diaries not because they expected anyone else to read them, but because writing imposed order. It turned endurance into narrative. You understand that impulse now. When suffering is structured into sentences, it feels more contained. Some entries linger on small details. The way frost formed inside a hat. The sound boots made on frozen ground. the smell of smoke clinging to hair for days. These observations mattered because they proved the writer had been awake enough to notice them. Awareness itself became an achievement. Other accounts are blunt. Cold, miserable, nearly lost the horse. Such lines appear without explanation, surrounded by ordinary concerns about miles travelled or meals eaten. Winter hardship sits beside routine life without ceremony. That contrast is striking. You catch yourself thinking in the same clipped way, assessing, noticing, moving on. The night has trained you into this mindset. Flowery thoughts feel out of place here. Precision matters more. Some people wrote letters home during winter journeys, often softening the truth. Cold nights became chilly evenings. Danger became inconvenience. Families worried enough without full detail. You wonder what you would omit if you were writing now. Which aches you would downplay. Which fears you would keep to yourself. There are journals that contradict each other completely. One person describes a night as survivable, even peaceful. Another on the same route calls it nearly fatal. Weather shifts, bodies differ, expectations shape experience. Memory edits ruthlessly. Later readers tried to compare these accounts to extract patterns. How cold was too cold? How far people could walk? How long they could rest? The answers refused to line up neatly. Human experience resisted tidy conclusions. You feel a strange companionship with those unnamed writers. Their words echo in your actions. Stop here, move now, check your hands, keep going. Advice passed forward without faces attached. The night feels less lonely with this imagined company. Others have stood in similar darkness, breathing similar air, making similar choices. You're not unique in this struggle. That realization steadies you. You adjust your pack again, the motion practiced. You think of how many diaries mention packs their weight, their straps cutting into shoulders. Objects become characters in these stories. The pack that saved food. The blanket that failed. The boots that betrayed someone at the worst moment. You test your boots again, feeling for stiffness, cracks, leaks. Leather endures until it does not. Many accounts blame footwear for misery more than weather itself. Cold could be negotiated. Bad boots could not. The urge to write to record flickers briefly. Not now, of course. Now you move. But later you imagine putting this night somewhere safe, contained in words, so it cannot reach you again so sharply. You walk on the rhythm, returning, breath, step, sound. The night thins slowly, not because dawn is near yet, but because your mind has found another way to occupy itself. Reflection becomes insulation of a different kind. People in the 1800s survived cold nights not only with wool and fire and movement, but with stories, told aloud, written down, remembered imperfectly. You carry that tradition forward now silently as you continue along the frozen road, adding your own unspoken account to the long record of nights endured. The rhythm of walking changes again, not because the road has altered, but because your thoughts drift toward those who did this under orders rather than necessity. You picture columns of soldiers moving through winter darkness, boots striking frozen ground in unison, breath rising in disciplined clouds. For them, stopping was rarely a choice. Winter campaigns in the 1800s were exercises in endurance more than strategy. Marching schedules ignored weather when they could, and when they could not. They adapted brutally. You feel a faint echo of that now, the way routine can override comfort when there is no alternative. One foot in front of the other, again, again. You remember reading about how soldiers were taught to keep moving even when exhausted, because halting too long invited stiffness that could cripple an entire unit. Officers feared stragglers not only for tactical reasons, but because falling behind in winter often meant never catching up. Cold erased margins quickly. Your shoulders ache imagining the weight they carried. Packs heavy with gear, muskets, awkward and gloved hands, uniforms never quite right for the conditions. Wool coats soaked with sweat by day froze stiff by night. Men learn to sleep sitting, leaning against each other, much as you have done, though often with less choice. There were routines meant to preserve warmth, frequent foot checks, orders to stamp and flex fingers, shared fires built quickly and abandoned just as quickly, discipline substituted for comfort. It did not always work. Some soldiers wrote later that winter nights were worse than battle. Fear sharpened the senses, but cold dulled them relentlessly. Waiting was agony. Moving hurt, but waiting hurt more. You understand that distinction now. You notice how your own posture has shifted unconsciously into something more rigid, more economical. Chin down, arms close, steps measured. The body learns from imagined examples as much as real ones. Stories from winter marches often contradict each other. One account praises strict routines as life-saving. Another condemns them as inflexible, claiming survival came from breaking ranks to seek shelter. Both are probably true depending on the night. You pause briefly, rolling your shoulders, easing tension. Soldiers rarely had that luxury. Orders dictated movement. Rest came when allowed, not when needed. That lack of agency magnified exhaustion. You think about how cold reshaped morale. Songs sung to keep cadence. Jokes told through chattering teeth. Anything to keep spirits from sinking too low. Morale mattered almost as much as calories and cloth. The wind brushes past again, tugging at your coat. You adjust it automatically, now movement's efficient. Practice accumulates even in a single night. You imagine sentries standing watch, motionless silhouettes against snow feeling cold, bite deeper with every minute. Standing still in winter was punishment. Relief came only when replaced, when movement returned, warmth to limbs. Some armies experimented with winter gear late in the century. Small improvements, better mittens, heavier coats. Progress arrived, slowly measured, in reduced casualties rather than comfort. Most changes came too late for those who needed them most. You walk on the road, quiet beneath your boots. Your breath fogs steadily, no longer ragged. You have found a sustainable pace, something soldiers would have recognized immediately. The nights still test you, but you meet it now with a kind of grim familiarity. You're not marching under orders, but you share the same truth those soldiers learned. In winter, survival favors those who keep moving with purpose even when purpose feels distant. You carry that understanding with you as you continue letting imagined footsteps beside you. Keep time reminding you that countless others endured nights like this, driven by duty, by necessity, by the simple fact that stopping was never an option. You move alone now, or at least it feels that way. The road stretches empty in both directions, and whatever companions you had earlier have fallen behind or chosen a different pace. Night travel often fractured groups like this, not through conflict, but through necessity. Everyone followed the speed their body could manage. The darkness feels thicker without others nearby. Your own sounds stand out more clearly. Breath, footsteps, the faint creak of leather. You listen harder, partly to stay alert, partly to reassure yourself that you are still here, still moving. There is a particular loneliness to riding or walking through winter nights that people mentioned without elaboration. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Awareness of space, of distance, of how small a single person feels when the landscape freezes solid around them. You think of messengers and couriers who travelled like this routinely. Postal riders moved through darkness because schedules demanded it. Letters did not wait for daylight. You imagine the pressure of that responsibility, knowing that stopping might mean frozen fingers and unread mail, but pressing on risked exhaustion or worse. You adjust your pace again, finding something steady and repeatable. Too fast and breath becomes shallow. Too slow and cold creeps in. The balance feels instinctive now. Your body has learned what it needs, at least for this hour. The road surface changes subtly beneath your boots. Packed snow gives way to ice, then back again. You test each step, never assuming consistency. Falls were dangerous in winter, not just for injury but for what followed. Getting up took time. Time stole heat. You keep your hands close to your body, thumbs tucked in, fingers curled. Gloves stiffen with cold, making fine movement difficult. You accept the clumsiness working around it rather than fighting it. At one point you hum softly, barely audible. The vibration feels comforting in your chest. Sound reminds you that you are awake. Some travellers talk to themselves for the same reason, voices low, words unimportant. Silence could be unsettling when fatigue pressed close. You notice how stars seem sharper now, more numerous. Clear skies bring colder nights. You do not need anyone to tell you that. Your skin already has. The stars feel close enough to touch bright points, watching without interest. There is a flicker of light far off to one side, maybe a lantern, maybe a reflection. You cannot be sure. Distance lies easily in winter darkness. You keep moving, not trusting it enough to change course. Your thoughts drift toward the end of this journey, not the destination exactly, but the moment when you can finally stop moving without consequence. A room, a wall, a corner, even an hour of stillness somewhere protected would feel like luxury. The cold presses against your back as wind shifts direction. You turn slightly, adapting without stopping. These adjustments come faster now, less conscious. You are learning the night's patterns. There is a quiet confidence that creeps in alongside fatigue. Not arrogance, but familiarity. You have been cold for a long time now, and you are still here. That matters. Many nights like this were survived not through dramatic acts, but through steady continuation. You glance down at your boots again, checking for stiffness, for cracks. Leather holds, for now. You flex your ankles, restoring movement. The ache eases slightly. The road remains empty. No voices, no animals, just you and the slow passage of time. This was how many winter journeys unfolded, long stretches of solitude punctuated by brief human contact. You walk on letting the rhythm carry you, breath and step aligned. The night does not feel kinder, but it feels more predictable. And predictability in winter travel is a form of mercy. The shapes around you begin to change again, not dramatically, but enough that you notice. The land grows tighter, edges closer in. Fences appear. Low walls, the faint outline of buildings huddled together as if for warmth. You have reached the edge of a town or a city, and somehow the cold feels different here. Urban cold carries smells, smoke that never fully clears, old refuse, wet stone. The air feels heavier, trapped between structures. Streets funnel wind into narrow channels, turning a breeze into something sharper. You pull your coat tighter as you step onto cobbles that bite harder through thin soles than packed earth ever did. There is comfort in proximity, though. Even closed doors suggest shelter. Even dark windows imply warmth stored behind glass and wood. You pass buildings with shutters drawn tight to life, tucked safely inside. It stirs something complicated in you, relief mixed with distance. City nights in winter were not gentle. Crowded housing meant heat was shared unevenly. Some rooms stifled, others froze. Chimneys smoked poorly in still air, leaving interiors damp and cold. People slept in layers indoors just as they did outside. The line between shelter and exposure blurred. You keep moving, wary of stopping in alleyways where wind swirls unpredictably. Snow piled against walls, churned into dirty ridges by passing feet and wheels. The ground is slick here, polished by traffic. You shorten your stride again, careful not to slip. There are others awake, though you do not see them clearly. A shadow moves behind a curtain. Footsteps echo briefly, then vanish. Night workers, watchmen, people whose lives unfolded while others slept. Their presence reminds you that winter did not pause cities, it reshaped them. You pass a row of shop shutters sealed. Goods behind them are wrapped and protected. You imagine wool stacked inside, blankets, boots, all the things that feel precious now. Commerce depended on winter travel continuing however miserable. Roads had to be walked, deliveries made. Cold was endured, not avoided. There is a habit you notice here that you did not see on open roads. People tuck their hands into aprons, into deep pockets, into sleeves crossed over the chest. Postures meant to conserve warmth while appearing casual. City cold demanded different strategies, quieter ones. You pause beneath a small overhang just long enough to step out of the wind. The difference is immediate. Stone blocks airflow well. You stand there, shifting weight, letting your back press briefly against brick. It holds a trace of warmth from earlier in the day, barely perceptible, but welcome. Some people slept outdoors in cities, even in winter, tucked into doorways or beneath stairs. You think of them now, wondering how they measured nights like this. Urban cold offered less space to move, fewer places to build fire, but more walls to hide against. Every environment reshuffled risk. You move on again, following the street as it bends. The city feels asleep, but not dead. Sounds carry differently here. A distant door closing, a cough behind a wall, the soft clatter of something shifting in the wind. Eventually, buildings thin again. The town gives way to open land, and with it the familiar exposure returns. The wind feels broader, less channeled. The stars reassert themselves. You feel oddly relieved. Open cold is honest. You adjust your clothing one more time, sealing in what warmth you gained from walls and stone. The night stretches ahead again, quieter now that human traces fade. Travellers of the past often wrote about this contrast. How cities promised warmth but delivered something complicated. How wilderness was harsh but predictable. You understand that now. You walk on, leaving the clustered shapes behind, carrying with you the brief sense of enclosure they offered. The road opens once more, and you return to the steady work of breathing, stepping, and staying warm enough until whatever comes next. Your fingers ache again, and this time the cause is not just cold, but wear. Straps loosen, not slip. The small systems holding your gear together strain under repeated use and stiffening materials. Winter travel has a way of turning minor flaws into urgent problems. You stop where the road bends slightly, giving you a bit of cover. The pause feels risky, but ignoring a failing strap would be worse. You shrug off your pack, carefully setting it down without letting it topple into snow. Leather creaks as you kneel. Everything sounds louder when the night is this still. The strapping question has stretched the hole, torn wider with each adjustment. You fumble for a solution, fingers clumsy inside gloves. Removing them helps dexterity but exposes skin immediately. You work quickly, breath shallow, aware of every second. People travelling in the 1800s became adept at repairing things in terrible conditions, not because they enjoyed it, but because there was no alternative. Boots were stitched by firelight, harnesses retied in snowstorms, clothing patched with whatever thread or cord could be spared. The ability to fix something mattered as much as the object itself. You pull out a length of twine stiff with cold. It resists bending, but you force it into a knot teeth, helping where fingers fail. The twine bites into your skin briefly. You ignore it. Pain is information, not an emergency, at least not yet. There is a method. You half remember something about doubling the knot, tucking the loose end back on itself to keep it from freezing open. You try it now, trusting memory more than certainty. The result is ugly, but secure enough. You stamp your feet while you work, keeping blood moving. The motion sends dull shocks up your legs. You welcome them. Standing still feels worse. Your breath fogs thickly over your hands. Moisture settles on the twine, stiffening it further. You finish quickly, then pull gloves back on, flexing fingers hard until sensation returns in waves. The repair holds, for now. Many fixes made in winter were temporary by design. Get through the night. Reach somewhere warmer, repair properly later. Improvisation ruled. You shoulder the pack again, testing weight distribution. It sits differently now, slightly off but manageable. You adjust your posture to compensate. Bodies adapted to gear as much as gear adapted to bodies. There is a quiet satisfaction in this moment. Not pride exactly, but relief. a problem noticed and addressed before it became disaster. People wrote about these moments with surprising clarity. They remembered the knot that held, the patch that failed, the decision that mattered. You glance down at your hands again, skin reddened, slightly cracked. You rub them together, then tuck them back into warmth. Exposure adds up. Each bare moment steals a little more heat than the last. The road waits. It always does. You pick up your pace again, letting movement rewarm you. The night seems to recede slightly as your focus sharpens. Winter travel demanded constant attention to small things. Big dangers announced themselves loudly. Small ones whispered until it was too late. You listen now for those whispers, scanning straps, seams, laces as you walk. Your mind drifts briefly to how many journeys ended because of something this minor. A broken buckle, a split sole, a torn cloak. Not dramatic, but decisive. Preparation mattered, but so did response. You move on carrying your repaired gear and the knowledge that you're holding everything together with effort and improvisation. It feels fragile. It is fragile. But for this moment it works. The cold does not relent, but neither do you. Each step takes you farther from the pause, farther from the problem, and closer to whatever shelter or daylight waits ahead. The night thins quietly, not with light yet, but with absence. Fewer sounds, less movement. Even the wind seems to pause as if holding its breath. This is often when the cold feels most dangerous, when exhaustion dulls your awareness and the world grows deceptively still. You notice it first in the way someone nearby does not move when others shift. At first you tell yourself they are resting deeply. That happens. People fall into heavy half-sleep after hours of strain. But something about the stillness lingers too long. You step closer, boots crunching softly. You speak a name or just a sound, low and careful. There is no response. You kneel, feeling cold bite through fabric immediately. A gloved hand touches an arm. It is stiff. Too stiff. This moment appears again and again in winter accounts, though rarely described directly. Writers circle around it, soften language, move on quickly. Someone did not wake. Someone stayed behind. Someone was buried later. The words rarely linger. You check, breathing, pressing an ear closer, feeling foolish for hoping. The cold preserves stillness cruelly. Faces look peaceful. Too peaceful. You pull your hand back, heart-heavy fingers aching from the contact. There is a quiet panic that threatens to rise, but it does not. Instead, a strange calm settles. Perhaps the cold has taught you this restraint. Or perhaps you have no room left for surprise. You straighten slowly, joints protesting, and look around. Others notice now. Someone approaches. A glance is enough. No shouting, no rush. The night does not allow it. Movements stay careful, almost reverent. People cluster briefly, then step back, understanding without words. What happens next varies. Sometimes the body is moved, sometimes it is not. Frozen ground resists digging. Light is scarce. Energy is gone. People make choices they carry forever. You know this without being told. You pull your coat tighter, feeling the cold press closer. Loss sharpens awareness. The night feels less abstract now, less theoretical. Survival narrows again to the most basic terms. There were no clear rituals for this on the road, no standard response. Some said prayers, some did not. Some marked the place. Some hurried away, unable to stay. The cold did not pause for grief. You stand there longer than you should, staring at the shape left behind. The stars look indifferent. The wind moves again, brushing past as if nothing has changed. It feels wrong, but it is also honest. Eventually someone touches your arm. A small gesture, a reminder. You nod, swallowing hard, and step away. Movement feels necessary now, urgent. Staying invites numbness of a different kind. As you walk, your thoughts tumble. What signs were missed? What could have been done differently? These questions haunt winter travel stories endlessly, rarely answered, often repeated. You become acutely aware of your own body again. Breathing, sensation, pain. You flex fingers, stamp feet, check your face. The loss has made vigilance sharper, not softer. People in the 1800s carried these moments with them for years. Letters written later hint at them obliquely. A winter that was hard, a journey that went badly, a silence where a name should be. The weight did not fade easily. You keep moving partly out of respect, partly out of fear. Fear that stopping too long will place you on the same path. Cold does not discriminate once weakness shows. The road stretches ahead again, empty and pale. You follow it, head lowered slightly, breath steady but shallow. The night feels closer now, pressing in with renewed intent. You think about how rarely survival stories include these moments fully, how success is counted in arrivals, not absences, how the cost is paid quietly away from celebration. Your steps quicken slightly, driven by something deeper than warmth now. A refusal, a promise you do not articulate. You will keep going. You will notice. You will not drift. The cold has taken something tonight, it always does. You acknowledge that truth without letting it stop you. Grief and motion coexist uneasily, but they coexist. As you walk on, the darkness begins to loosen at its edges. Not light yet, but possibility. You hold on to that, letting it pull you forward, carrying with you the memory of stillness and the resolve it leaves behind. The night continues thinner now, and you continue with it one careful step at a time. The road feels altered after what you have seen, not physically different, but charged somehow, as if every step now carries more weight. The cold has not changed. The stars have not moved. Yet your awareness sharpens, drawn inward and outward at the same time. You notice habits emerging almost automatically. A small gesture before walking on. Touching fabric at your chest. Adjusting your scarf again, even though it does not need it. These motions feel protective, almost ritualistic, though you would not have named them that way before tonight. Winter travel encouraged these behaviors. People repeated certain actions, not because they guaranteed safety, but because they offered a sense of control. When the environment refused to cooperate, routine filled the gap. You understand that now. Repetition steadies the mind when uncertainty presses close. You recall hearing about travellers who would not set out without performing small acts first. Tapping boots together, breathing into gloves, turning once toward the road behind them before facing forward again. No one claimed these actions stopped the cold. They stopped panic. You find yourself doing something similar now. Before resuming a steady pace, you pause and listen. Not for danger exactly, but for confirmation. Wind. Your own breath. The faint crunch of boots. Sound reassures you that the world is still responding. There is comfort in order, even invented order. You walk a certain number of steps, then check your hands. You check your hands, then adjust your pack. You adjust your pack, then breathe deeply 3 times. The pattern repeats. It keeps your thoughts from spiraling. People in the 1800s lived closer to superstition than modern travellers like to admit. Not out of ignorance, but necessity. When explanations failed, belief filled the space. Cold nights produced habits that bordered on ritual because rituals calmed fear. You feel the cold settle again, seeping through layers with familiar persistence. The ache in your joints returns steady and dull. You greet it almost neutrally now. Pain has become information, not alarm. At one point you whisper something under your breath, a phrase remembered from childhood, a name, a hope. The words do not matter much. Speaking them does. Sound anchors you to the present. You remember stories of people who refused to travel in winter on certain nights, believing them unlucky. Full moons, particular dates, weather patterns that felt ominous. Others scoffed at this. Some listened carefully. Outcomes varied. No rule proved reliable. You adjust your path slightly to avoid a patch of deeper snow, then correct again. The body remains alert, responding without deliberation. These small choices accumulate into survival. The cold has stripped the world down to essentials: movement, breath, awareness. Everything else feels distant. Even fear has softened, replaced by focus. You're not fearless, you're occupied. You think again of those who travelled often, who learned to live with this mindset season after season. Winter became a companion unwelcome but familiar. Respect replaced dread. Vigilance replaced panic. Your steps settle into a quiet rhythm once more. The road accepts you without comment. The night remains vast, but it no longer feels overwhelming. You have learned how to inhabit it. There is no clear boundary between habit and belief now. They blend together, reinforcing each other. Touching fabric reminds you to stay covered. Speaking aloud reminds you to stay awake. Counting steps reminds you to keep moving. You walk on guided by these small human inventions. Not guarantees, not magic, but tools shaped by fear and endurance. In the 1800s, many travellers carried such tools without naming them, relying on ritual, as much as reason to get through the longest nights. The darkness thins further at the edges. You do not celebrate yet. You know better. Dawn will come when it comes. Until then, you keep walking, repeating what works, letting habit carry you forward through the cold. At some point, without fanfare, the night begins to loosen its grip. You do not notice light at first. What you notice is movement returning to your body in a different way. Muscles that felt locked now respond a little faster. Joints complain less when you bend them. The cold is still there, but it has shifted from something that presses inward to something that lingers on the surface. You realize you have been waiting for this change without fully admitting it. Motion feels easier now, not because you are rested, but because the promise of warmth has crept closer. Even before sunrise, the idea of morning alters how you move. You begin to walk more deliberately, knowing that stopping too long could undo what little thaw has begun. People learned this instinctively. After a frozen night, stillness could be as dangerous as exhaustion. Blood needed encouragement to return where it had retreated. You stretch your arms as you walk, swinging them gently to restore circulation. The motion feels exaggerated at first, then natural. You roll your shoulders, flex your hands, open and close your fingers, testing their willingness to cooperate. Sensation returns unevenly, sometimes painfully, sometimes with relief. There is a sound that accompanies this thaw. Snow softens underfoot. The crunch dulls slightly. Ice loses its sharp voice. These changes are subtle, but you have learned to hear them. They signal that time has moved forward even if the sky still looks dark. You remember reading that many travellers forced themselves to walk faster at dawn, not to hurry the journey, but to help their bodies recover. Movement flushed cold from muscles. It hurt, but it worked often enough to become habit. You increase your pace just enough to feel your breath deepen. Pain follows, sharp and insistent, especially in toes and fingers. You grit your teeth and accept it. This pain is different from numbness. It signals life returning. People fear the absence of feeling far more than this burning ache. You stop briefly to rub your hands together, then press them against your chest beneath your coat. Heat spreads slowly, unevenly. You wait until the worst of the sting passes before resuming. Patience matters here. Rushing the thaw can make things worse. There are stories of people who lost fingers or toes not during the coldest hours, but during careless warming afterward. Too close to fire, too sudden a change. You keep this in mind, letting warmth return gradually. The sky lightens almost imperceptibly. Stars fade one by one, not all at once. The world does not announce morning, it eases into it. You watch this process quietly, feeling your own body mirror it. Your breathing steadies, the tightness in your chest loosens. Each inhale feels fuller than the last. You cough, once then, not again. The air feels less hostile now. You think briefly of those who did not reach this moment. The thought is heavy, but it sharpens gratitude rather than guilt. You are still moving. That matters. As the ground softens slightly, you adjust your footing again. Slips are more likely during thaw. You shorten your stride, paying attention to balance. Winter does not release you all at once. It tests you until the end. There is a quiet satisfaction in this stage of the journey. Not joy exactly, but relief layered with caution. You have learned not to trust early warmth completely. The night can still bite if you misjudge it. You walk on, letting motion finish what endurance began. Blood returns, stiffness fades, sensation settles into something manageable. The cold retreats to a memory you carry rather than an enemy you face directly. Morning is coming. You do not rush it. You meet it at the pace your body allows, knowing that survival in the 1800s was not about dramatic escapes, but about recognizing these small turning points and moving through them without wasting the chance they offered. Light arrives cautiously as if unsure it is welcome. The sky does not brighten all at once. It softens, edges blur. Darkness loosens its grip in layers, retreating rather than vanishing. You notice the change not with your eyes first, but with your body. The cold still clings to you, but it no longer feels absolute. It has boundaries now. It settles on fabric and skin without reaching as deep. Your steps feel more certain. Balance returns. Muscles respond without the long delay that marked the night. You slow slightly, not from fatigue, but from awareness. Morning reveals what darkness hid, the unevenness of the road, the shallow ruts, the thin crust of ice that glows faintly now instead of blending into shadow. You place each step more carefully, appreciating sight in a new way. Breath no longer plumes as thickly in front of your face. The air still bites, but it does not steal. You inhale more deeply, testing your lungs. They answer without protest. That feels like a gift. Your clothing feels heavier now, damp with night. Wool has done its work, but it carries the memory of cold in its weight. You adjust layers again, loosening them slightly as your body warms. The change feels subtle but important. Trapped heat can become discomfort quickly once movement continues. You notice the world waking in small ways. A bird calls once tentative. Snow shifts from a branch. The wind changes tone, less sharp, more fluid. These sounds mark time more reliably than any clock you have known. You stretch again, longer this time, arms overhead, spine lengthening. The movement sends a slow wave of sensation through your back and legs. It hurts, but it is a clean pain, one that fades as warmth follows. There is a temptation now to stop fully, to sit, to rest in the promise of daylight. You resist it gently. Experience has taught you that stopping too soon can steal momentum. Movement finishes what endurance started. You look down at your hands, flexing fingers. Skin is red and cracked but responsive, nails pale. Sensation returns evenly now. You rub them together, then let them swing freely at your sides. The night feels distant already, though it has only just ended. Memory blurs quickly once the immediate danger passes. You hold on to it deliberately for a moment, not to dwell, but to learn. Every ache tells a story your body will remember, even if your mind moves on. You adjust your path toward where the road curves gently upward. Higher ground warms first. You feel it underfoot, a subtle difference in the way cold releases its hold. Morning light reveals tracks you did not see before. Footprints, animal prints, wagon marks half filled with snow, evidence of others moving through this space while you endured the night. You're not alone in this landscape, even when it feels that way. Your pace steadies again, comfortable now. The rhythm feels almost pleasant. The cold has become something you carry rather than something that pushes against you. You breathe in slow and deep and let the air fill your chest without fear. The tension you didn't realize you were holding loosens. Shoulders drop, jaw unclenches. The sun remains hidden, but its presence is implied in the color of the sky. Pale, clean, promise without urgency. You walk on, letting daylight gather around you, aware that survival did not come from a single action, but from hundreds of small decisions layered through the night. Now, in the gentle return of light, those decisions settle into something quieter. Endurance becomes memory. Cold becomes context. With the light growing stronger, the road feels less like an adversary and more like a witness. It shows you what it has been holding back all night. The bends that forced you to slow, the shallow ditch that waited patiently for a misstep, the place where snow drifted deeper than expected. You see now how carefully you moved without knowing all the reasons why. Your body carries the evidence of the night plainly. Clothes hang differently heavier with moisture and wear. Your boots creak less sharply softened by use and slight thaw. Every joint seems to speak when you ask it to move, not in complaint exactly, but in acknowledgement. You made it through, this is the cost. You test your pace, letting yourself walk just a little more freely. The difference is noticeable. Balance returns fully. Your arms swing without conscious effort. Breath and step fall into an easy rhythm that feels almost generous after the tight control of the night. There is a moment, brief but clear, when you realize you're no longer managing survival minute by minute. You're simply traveling again. The distinction matters. During the night, every choice was deliberate. Now some choices can be instinctive again. The cold remains present, but it has lost its authority. It no longer dictates every movement. It lingers instead like a stern reminder rather than an active threat. You feel it on your cheeks, in the tips of your fingers, but it does not dominate your thoughts. You begin to notice fatigue more clearly now that urgency has eased. It settles into your muscles as a deep, familiar heaviness. This tiredness feels earned, honest. You know it will follow you for hours, perhaps days, but it no longer frightens you. You stop briefly, not because you must, but because you can. You loosen a strap, roll your shoulders again, shift weight from foot to foot. The ground feels solid beneath you. The pause feels safe. When you start walking again, you notice how your thoughts turn backward, reviewing the night without instruction. Small decisions replay themselves, choosing to keep moving, adjusting clothing when it mattered, not lying down fully. None of these moments felt dramatic at the time. Now you see how they added up. The road ahead looks longer in daylight, but also clearer. Distance is honest in the light. You can see where you're going even if you cannot yet reach it. That alone changes how the journey feels. You pass a stand of trees where the snow is thinner beneath the branches. Droplets fall as the air warms slightly, tapping softly against leaves and frozen ground. The sound is gentle, almost soothing. It marks the transition more clearly than the sky does. Your senses widen again. During the night they narrowed for focus. Now they open. You smell damp earth beneath snow, cold bark, your own clothing. You hear birds stirring, cautiously testing the morning. These details feel rich after hours of monotony. You think about how people remembered nights like this later. Rarely in exact detail. More often as a feeling. The weight of cold, the length of darkness, the relief of morning. Memory compresses experience into shapes that fit more easily inside the mind. You understand now why some accounts speak plainly and move on. Describing every ache and fear would take too much space. Better to record the outcome, reach the next place, survive the night, continued. Your steps leave clearer prints, now edges softening as the snow responds to warming air. You look back once, noticing how quickly signs of your passage already begin to fade. Winter erases evidence efficiently. The thought is strangely calming. The night that felt endless has already begun to disappear. Soon it will exist only in you, in stiffness, in memory, in the quiet confidence that follows endurance. You straighten a little as you walk, posture no longer defensive. Shoulders open, head lifts. The horizon feels accessible again. Even if shelter remains miles away, the path to it is visible. You drink a little water, letting it sit briefly in your mouth before swallowing. It tastes clean and cold, but not hostile. Your body accepts it readily now. There is a softness creeping into the morning that invites reflection. Not analysis, just awareness. You let yourself feel grateful without making a ceremony of it. Gratitude here is simple. You are moving. You are warm enough. You are alive. The night taught you things you will not list later, but you will carry them. How to listen to your body, how to respect small warnings, how to endure without rushing. These lessons do not announce themselves. They settle quietly. As you continue, you notice the sky shift again, pale light deepening slightly, colours emerging where there were none before. The world regains dimension. Shadows lengthen and soften. Contrast returns. You walk on no longer counting steps or breaths. Those measures are no longer needed. The road takes over again, guiding you forward without demanding constant negotiation. The cold night becomes part of your past, not something you must face again right now. You let it go gradually, knowing that memory will smooth its edges, but the understanding it left behind will remain ready to surface the next time the world grows cold and dark and asks you to keep going anyway. You reach a place where the road widens slightly, not enough to feel grand, just enough to suggest arrival rather than passage. A bend opens the view ahead. Fields stretch out. A line of trees mark shelter somewhere beyond sight. The world feels settled now, no longer clenched against the cold in the same way. Your body responds to this shift almost immediately. Shoulders drop, jaw relaxes. The tight vigilance that carried you through the night begins to loosen its hold. You're still tired, deeply so, but the tiredness feels safe now, contained. You slow your pace without fear. Each step lands with confidence rather than caution. The ground holds you. The light holds you. The cold, though still present, has lost its power to demand constant negotiation. You stop at last, truly stop, not just pause. Standing still feels different in daylight. The cold no longer rushes in the moment you cease movement. It lingers politely, like a reminder rather than a threat. You breathe in deeply, filling your lungs without effort. The air feels cleaner now, less sharp. You exhale slowly, watching the faint trace of breath fade quickly instead of hanging heavy. That change alone feels like proof that the worst has passed. You take stock quietly. Fingers sore but functional. Feet aching but steady. Skin tender where wind worked it hardest. Nothing feels urgent. Everything feels survivable. You accept these sensations without judgment. They are the residue of the night, nothing more. You think about rest, real rest, the kind that does not require vigilance. A bench, a wall, a place where you can sit fully without calculating consequences. The idea feels almost luxurious after hours of restraint. You also think about how easily this night could blur into others like it, how memory will compress it into a single impression of cold and endurance. Yet some details will stay sharp. The sound of ice, the weight of damp wool, the moment when light returned. You realize that this is how people carried such experiences forward. Not as stories told in full, but as instincts. Knowledge stored in muscle and habit. Lessons that surface quietly the next time cold presses close. You take another few steps unhurried now. The road accepts this slower rhythm easily. There is no need to rush. Daylight has made a promise it intends to keep. As you move on, you feel the night recede fully into memory. Not erased, but settled. It no longer demands attention. It becomes something you survived rather than something you are surviving. You glance once more at the sky, brighter now, pale blue beginning to show through the grey. The stars are gone. The world has turned its face toward warmth again. You walk forward, carrying the quiet knowledge of what it took to reach this point. Not strength alone, not luck alone. Attention, patience, willingness to adjust, willingness to endure without surrender. The coldest part of the journey is behind you now. What remains is recovery, reflection and rest. You allow yourself to feel that shift without rushing past it. The road continues, but it feels gentler. The day opens ahead wide and calm, and you move into it with steady steps, letting the memory of the night fade naturally as warmth and light take their place. The movement eases out of you slowly now, the way a held breath finally releases after you realize there is no longer any danger in letting it go. You find a place to rest, maybe nothing more than a quiet stretch beside the road, and you allow your body to settle without calculation. The cold lingers lightly on the surface of your skin, but it no longer reaches inward. It feels distant, almost polite, as if it knows its time with you has passed. You sit or lean, or simply stand still for a while and notice how the world continues without urgency. Light drifts across the ground. Sounds return in gentle layers. Somewhere far off, life resumes its ordinary rhythms, unconcerned with the night you just endured. That is how it always goes. The world moves on even when you've been held tightly by the dark for hours. Your breathing slows on its own. Each inhale feels full, each exhale unforced. Muscles soften one by one, releasing the work they have been doing since dusk. The aches remain, but they are no longer warnings. They are reminders. Proof that you stayed awake, stayed aware, stayed moving when it mattered most. You let your thoughts wander now, not searching for lessons, not replaying decisions, just drifting gently through the memory of cold air, quiet roads, and the steady rhythm that carried you through. There is no need to hold on to any of it too tightly. What you needed to learn has already settled where it belongs. As warmth slowly returns, whether from daylight shelter or simple rest, you allow yourself to feel safe again. The night loosens completely, folding itself away into the past, leaving behind only a faint impression, like frost melting from glass. You close your eyes if you want to and let stillness replace vigilance. There is nothing you need to do right now. No adjustments to make. No signs to watch for. Just rest. The road will be there when you're ready to move again. For now, you are exactly where you need to be. Sweet dreams.